evening and welcome to today's Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. Apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yes, apologies from Councillor Cook, and I'm substituting for her.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor.
Sorry, please use the microphone.
Oh, it is now. Good evening, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Dan MacDonald, for whom I'm subbing for this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Councillor Spring, substituting for Councillor Clark this evening.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 2, the record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 30th of January as correct? I have no urgent matters. Are there any declarations of DPR or other interests or any declarations of whipping? Councillor Hamilton.
I'm a member of the National Education Union.
Councillor Bowen.
I'm a member of Unite the Union.
Councillor Brown.
I'm a member of Unison.
Councillor Harker-Scott.
I'm a member of the National Education Union, the Fostering Trade Union, Unite, and I work for the TUC Disabled Workers Committee.
Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member and workplace representative of TSSA, but I'm also a member of Unison.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. In view of my colleagues' declarations, I'm going to say that I'm a member of the Public and Commercial Services Union.
Thank you. Councillor Printer.
And I'm a member of the ASLIF Trade Union. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
And I'm a member of Unison. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 5. I'd like to welcome the Leader of the Council. Can I ask the Leader of the Council if he has any comments prior to questions?
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, I feel I should probably declare I'm a member of the GMB Trade Union, because I am, very proudly so. I want to make 3 very brief remarks, and then recognising that within here it said I would give a verbal update on something, so I'm going to do that as well. Firstly, I want to thank members of this committee and the other 3 overview and scrutiny committees. I tune in for most meetings, normally the morning after, if I'm brutally honest, because some of them can run quite late. But the scrutiny of both cabinet members, but also policies, particularly when it's pre-decision scrutiny, and I'd always want to see as much of that as the calendar allows. Sometimes that's just not practically possible. But I want to thank you all for the work that you do here. It's important and it's part of our democratic process. Secondly, I want to thank obviously, I thank all officers often, but tonight in particular, those within my portfolios, a number of whom are here tonight. I couldn't do the things I do as portfolio holder for all the stuff listed on the first page without the brilliant officers working tirelessly for this council. And I know the other 9 cabinet members would say that as well, and I would agree with them too. And then finally, I want to thank the people of Medway for supporting both me personally, but our administration, in recognising some of the challenges we've had to deal with over the first 22 months and counting, but also recognising the positives, of which there are many, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those this evening. I wanted to update colleagues as per the report around local government reorganisation. Some of this has been documented elsewhere, but just for clarity, and I'm referring to paragraph 4.4 here. Just to let colleagues know, and I think all colleagues should have received this by email, but if you haven't, do let me know and we'll make sure it's circulated again. I was one of 14 signatories to a combined Region of Kent submission to say we're absolutely up for the conversation about local government reorganisation, listing a lot of reasons why we think that's important. It's been a privilege to work with those other 13 council leaders of all political persuasions, and we kind of leave the rosettes at the door when it comes to this matter of making our case to government. And separate to that, a letter was submitted from myself, again directly to government, to advocate for 4 councils for this region of ours. It means that obviously our current council will be substantially smaller than what we will end up with, and I think it's important to recognise the work of the cross-party devolution and local government reorganisation group that will be looking at some of the really important granular matters as we move forward. We'll be getting feedback from government over the next couple of weeks, and there'll be formal feedback, we're told, week commencing the 28th of April, bearing in mind that 84% of our region is in pre-election period till 10 p.m. on the Thursday night that week. I would anticipate we'll get that feedback on the Friday. And again, as always, we'll share that as quickly as possible, both through group leaders, but also through other channels. As always, very happy to take any compliments or queries.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Members. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Good evening, Vincent. Thank you for your very well-written report. But as I say, I've read it with interest. But as I say, the proof of the pudding, I'll go on. Firstly, I appreciate your comments and praise for the undeniable success of the Cosington Park Leisure Centre. Let us not forget that this very project was once dismissed as a white elephant and deemed a complete waste of money by the Labour group, who fiercely opposed it in every turn and sought to have it scrapped. If memory served, it was only approved at full council thanks to the Mayor's casting vote. Nevertheless, it is both refreshing and heartwarming when a politician actually admits he was wrong. Moving on. Vince, your ability to navigate and harmonise the diverse perspectives within your party is truly commendable. You clearly have a deep understanding of inclusivity and a commitment to fostering unity amongst differences. Having said that, however, are you genuinely satisfied with the performance of your portfolio holders, particularly the portfolio holder for community safety, highway and enforcement? Residents in my ward have been left in the dark, unable to get a response from questions regarding school streets from either him or the officers in his team. So how can they make a valid contribution to the consultation if information vital to them is withheld? This is just not, it isn't just a failure of communication, it's a failure of leadership. You campaigned on the promise of listening to residents, yet your actions, or the lack thereof, tell a different story. And to add insult to injury, your budget anticipates raising £200,000 from PCNs related to school street infringements. Is this neglect of residents concerned a deliberate strategy to boost revenue, I ask myself? It's worth noting that during previous administration, former Councillor Jarrett emphasised the importance of councillors, including portfolio holders, responding to residents within 5 working days. And moving on from that, the result of a Freedom of Information request shows that Medway Council School Street scheme has already issued 3,000 fines in the first month after the grace period ended. These fines, set at £70 each, which is reduced to £35 if paid within 21 days, have generated between £99,000 and £198,000 in revenue during that time. The Council has stated that all revenue from these fines is invested into the road network. I'm looking forward to seeing the results when it arrives. It seems the initiative is both a safety measure and a way to fund local infrastructure improvements. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this approach. And just to conclude, I have observed firsthand, as well as heard from others, that parking violations on the roads near school streets are being overlooked. I've personally witnessed as traffic warden standing by as vehicles were parked dangerously, not only on roundabouts, but also on street corners and in fact double parked. Now this poses a significant risk, and it seems inevitable that a child could be seriously injured. And I would like it noted for the record that before long there's a real risk of a serious accident involving either a parent or a child at near Mayor's Court School, for which the Council will bear an ultimate responsibility. Despite reporting this issue to officers multiple times, the only response I have has been a very delayed acknowledgement, with an apology of course, but with no tangible improvements. And I would appreciate hearing your perspective on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you,
Can I make
Councillor
a point
Kemp.
of order?
Yes, Councillor Field.
Is that question not pertaining to the regeneration, culture and environment overview and scrutiny and their jurisdiction rather than the portfolio of the Leader of the Council who's here to speak to his portfolio tonight?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Field.
I can answer that question. It responds to the fact that Councillor Maple is the leader of the council, the leader of your party, and ultimately responsible for the action of his portfolio holders. And if his portfolio holders aren't responding in the way that perhaps other people think they should, then the leader of the council needs to be made aware of it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Maple.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your question. I think Councillor Field is right in raising that. However, I'm very happy, as I do have strategic overview for the Council, to give an overview. You will not expect me to have granular detail on every roundabout in Medway, but let me answer those questions in turn. So on Cossington Park, let's be very, very clear. We never voted against the principle of Cossington Park. And it's interesting, Councillor Kemp, that you refer to the fact that the Mayor's casting vote was required. I wouldn't say this, but some cynically would say the reason the Mayor's casting vote was required by the administration is because the administration's whip wasn't there doing their job properly. Now, I wouldn't say that, but others may go down. That will be for other people. Do I think my cabinet are doing a good job? Yes, absolutely. Sometimes in challenging circumstances. And you referred particularly to Councillor Patterson. I don't know why there hasn't been a response to that. If you want to forward that on to me, I'm very happy to have a look at that specifically, particularly if there hasn't been a response from officers. On listening, of course, you will recall that changes were made to the Rainham Red Routes scheme as a direct result of listening. And again, this administration has time and time again, rightfully in my view, gone far beyond the statutory minimum for consultation. We could, if we chose to, do one lot of consultation on school streets. We have consistently done two, pre and post, effectively, decisions. So from that perspective, that's the right thing to do. And on the Mayor's Court roundabout, look, again, that will be for officers to give you the technical reasons as to why they feel that the appropriate action has been taken or no further action is required. But again, if you wish to forward that on to me, I'm very happy to have a look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Maple.
Thank you. I will do that.
Please.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Maple for his report. Benefits and financial welfare services comes under the Leader's remit, particularly the Household Support Fund. And as everyone knows, the Chancellor has announced a number of changes to welfare, including payments to the most vulnerable in society. The government's impact assessment of these changes states that 250,000 people and 50,000 children will be pushed into poverty. This is proportionally around 1,000 local people, and 200 local children in the Medway Council area. My question is, will the Leader be writing to the government opposing these welfare changes? And also, is Medway Council prepared for the likely impact from these changes and an increase in those needing support from Medway Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much for that question. I haven't read the Green Paper yet, and I want to, because sometimes the devil is in the detail, as they say. I think particularly for those on social media, they will know that I have a long track record of supporting residents, particularly with PIP. I've supported more than 30 residents. The vast majority Chatham Central and Brompton, or Chatham Central as they were before, residents, but occasionally from other parts of the community, because they've sought some advice and support, and I've always, wherever possible, been able to give that. We've won more than 90% of those appeals to get those welfare benefits in place, not because I'm any good, but because the system under the previous government wasn't good. People were waiting 2.5, 3 years in some circumstances to have their appeal heard. And on at least one occasion, literally when we walked into the court, and it is a court because that's where the tribunals are heard here in Medway, the panel said, we're upholding your appeal. They asked one question and they upgraded the individual to the maximum permissible weekly allowance. So the system is broken. It needs reform. I am concerned about the potential impacts of what the government has been reported to be proposing. And again, I want to take my own judgment on that when I read the Green Paper. And certainly, I would want to see a system which works for the people of Medway. We have stepped in and supported the community. Colleagues here will be aware that back in the winter, myself and Teresa Murray insured, an additional 1,600 residents who just missed out on winter fuel payment, were supported again through the Household Support Fund. That's the right thing to do, and at the same time encouraging those who are entitled, in that case, to pension credit, to get that additional support every single week, not just a one-off sum of money. So I'll be looking at this carefully. I want the best outcomes for Medway's vulnerable residents. It's worth remembering, and I know most people in here will know this, but for the avoidance of doubt, many people who receive PIP are in work. This is not an out-of-work benefit, as has been reported by some media outlets. And I know there are individuals working in many Medway organisations who receive it. And if they don't continue to receive it, and let's be clear, again, as reported, there won't be a cut-off point and say at this point you're not receiving it. It will be as people go through their normal review processes. That will may be considered if what's on the table ends up being the changes which are proposed. I need to look at how that would impact on the people of Medway. That's what I'm here for. So, yeah, absolutely, I'll be looking at that carefully. It is a proposal at the moment. It will go through legislative processes. I suspect we will see changes, as is often the case, whoever's in government, when you go through that legislative process. But no, for me personally, as some people will be aware, before I did this, I worked at the DWP, so I know how this process works. It needs review. And the final thing I'd say on this, and again, thank you for raising it, it's a really important issue, is the council stands ready. And actually one of the things that is reported, which I think is really good, and I say this again from conversations I've had, and I know other colleagues as ward councillors would have had, there are definitely people who the concept of right to try is the bit of the system that's been missing. So I want to see more detail on that. I've had the conversations with the individuals who say, I want to give it a try, I want to get back into that workplace or go to the workplace for the first time, but I'm concerned if I do and it doesn't work out, where do I end up? If the government's going to improve that, that is a good thing. Thank you for that question, really important. And I know there'll be residents in every one of the 24 wards of Medway who will be wanting to see where this ends up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mipp. Before I come to Councillor Harker-Scarf, Councillor Mipp, I just want to follow on PIP, actually. What do you think about residents who work, as you said? This is a benefit for people who work as well, that will require home care or any adaptation. I mean, how do you think this new proposal will impact on those?
Again, I haven't read the Green Paper yet, so I don't know, and we don't know what the legislation and the changes in processes will look like. I think from my perspective as leader of this council, I want us to be playing our role. You know, we have certain grants that we use every year and use them well, particularly through adaptations to properties, things like that. So we need to be doing as much of that as we can in a way which helps those vulnerable individuals. Absolutely recognising that the process needs to ensure that for those who are working, that they can continue to work. For those who want to work and aren't at the moment, we need to make sure all the processes, whether that's us as a council, the DWP, the voluntary sector, people like the FSB, for people who are looking to move into perhaps setting up their own business as their journey. We need to make sure all the systems are on their side. At points, it feels as if, certainly, and again, not necessarily just after the last 14 years, but even before that, that people in these processes, that there are examples where there are multi-generational families who are on welfare and people want to break that cycle. And actually the systems, so not just the DWP, not just the council, but the systems aren't always focused in a way that can help that. Again, things like the right to try for people who've got medical conditions, that's got to be a good thing. Got to be a good thing.
Thank you. Councillor Hagroska.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maple. Can I say a big appreciation for being so visual? Obviously, when I got elected in 2019, I couldn't even get onto the podium. And, you know, I can do that now. And, you know, so I do feel that you're inclusive and people aren't overlooked. And you're so visual, which your predecessor, nobody in my household knew who he was until I got elected. So thank you for that. Now, obviously, we've kind of, you know, when the party opposite were in power, we kind of had a kind of what I call typical capitalism boom and bust, but with our most vulnerable, with our children. You know, we went into inadequate in 2019 and we had to spend over £3 million to come out of that. I'm really interested in the fact that you're, even though things are tight, that you are maintaining funding for our most vulnerable of our community. And we're moving on to hopefully become outstanding at some stage. But what I'm concerned about is there's a national shortage of foster carers, of social workers, and of people. You know, London's 25 minutes down the road with London Waiting or Outer London Waiting. What do you feel we can do, and what are you going to be doing to harness growing our own, if you like, but also keeping the good calibre of staff that we do have in our officers and social workers in Medway Council?
Thank you. And Joe, thanks for the work that you're doing as chair of that important ONS, you know, those conversations on scrutiny and corporate parenting as well. I think for me, that's one of the most important organisational bodies we have. We're all corporate parents. We should never forget that. I'd say a couple of things on this. Firstly, everything we've done for the last 2 years has been focused on this. So whether it is, you know, pay rises which are reasonable, whether it is improving the people promise, you know, things which some may go, we shouldn't be doing that. Respectfully, I disagree with them. I think it is about trying to give that total reward is an HR phrase, which is fine, but it does what it says on the tin. So it's not just about what people got put into their bank on Tuesday. It's about all the other things that matter to individuals. And that's important because actually at the moment, whether I like it or not, for upper tier authorities like us, agencies are making a healthy profit out of temporary staff. And that leads me to my second point. Look, we've made some good progress, but there have been pinch points where we've had to bring in some additional staff for specific tasks. So one example, which again, I would make the same decision again, is where when we took over, we had a situation where the backlog on EHCPs was illegal. We had to do something about that. So bringing in some temporary staff to massively reduce to the point now we're dealing with almost business as usual effectively, which is where we should be, does mean that there'll be occasional spikes in that. And I've never said there'll be no temporary staff, but what we need to do is try and move away. And we're seeing this in legal, in adults, in children's social care, people who are locums going, I want to work for Medway. And that could be for a number of different reasons. And then just the final point I'd say on this, even if you had zero compassion, even if you didn't care about 63,000 young people, if you thought children don't matter in Medway, if you were just looking after the finance portfolio, if we slip back from where we are, from good, then we will lose that service. There's a very strong possibility of that. And actually, that's just then more expensive to deliver. So even if you don't care about children, which for the avoidance of doubt, I definitely do. But even if you didn't, actually from a cold, hard balance sheet perspective, going backwards on children's services puts at risk financial sustainability. So it's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do because actually, from a financial perspective, not doing that, and that does mean a bit of upfront funding and right-sizing, but actually not doing that means we'll be paying somebody else to deliver that service and paying VAT on top of that. So yeah, absolutely, I'm proud of what we're doing. There's more to do. We're not complacent. We continue the monthly meetings from my perspective. You know, Adam in particular, Councillor Price doing a great job working with officers. We're going to recruit that permanent assistant director now. Obviously, Kelly Cogger's doing a great job as our interim. We'll go through that recruitment process to put that permanent role filled. But it was right to have that interim while we went through the process that we have done. So, yeah, look forward to that recruitment process in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medway. Councillor Printer.
Thank you, Vince. Just wanted to talk about really what Medway's role nationally and regionally is. You know, for me, my mother-in-law brought her family to come and live here because she thought Medway was a great place to live. My father worked here and I'm a child of an economic migrant. It was only because the Tories really did stop the boats in '84 that got taken away. But what I want to really ask is, devolution is really happening, so we need to be involved in that conversation. And I know you've been working close with the LGA and neighbouring leaders, but how are we making sure that Medway's voice is heard in those bigger conversations? And there was obviously a clear ambition around devolution and local government reform, but how do we make sure Medway shapes rather than reacts to those changes going forward? Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. And yeah, we've all got, every one of us around this table, whether we were born here or came here from somewhere else, Medway's our home, and that's really important. You know, I talk about one Medway a lot, and it's well, it means all of those things to everybody. So it's 285,000 different stories. And eventually there won't be a Medway council, but Medway, the place, absolutely continues to exist, as do the 5 towns, as do the Peninsula, as does Twiddle and Lordswood, which is not a town, and all of the other places. You know, identity is important to people. And I think actually that's part of the conversation which I think we'll have between now and November, where we have to put in our submission to government on local government reorganisation. So 2 or 3 things on this. By the nature of us being an upper tier authority, the devolution conversation continues to sit with me and whoever the leader of Kent County Council is. I shouldn't talk about them because we're in pre-election period over there, but I'm not standing for election. So whoever the people of Kent decide to lead their council, I will work constructively with them, as I have done with Roger Goth over the last 22 months. And we don't agree on everything, but we disagree agreeably, and that's okay, because actually, when you're putting the case for the region of Kent, you know, you've got 14 people. Kent, as a region, has never had more diverse political leadership. You've got Labour leaders of councils, Conservatives, Lib Dems, Green, and Independent, all leading councils out of those 14. So actually getting us to agree, frankly, what day of the week it is should be really difficult. But actually, both in the devolution priority place bid, which was frustratingly unsuccessful, but also the local government reorganisation, that has happened. And I'd pay tribute, in particularly from a Medway perspective, to Richard Hicks, our Chief Executive. He plays a leading role. There's Kent leaders, but there's also Kent chiefs. The 14 of them meet on I think on an almost hourly basis at the moment on some of these issues, sometimes too early in the morning as well for my liking. So that, and Richard is a key voice for that. So in that cohort of people, Richard is flying our flag. With Kent leaders, I'm absolutely flying the Medway flag to make sure that our voice is heard within there. And as I say, as an upper tier authority, some of the statutory stuff comes to me as it is at the moment, me and Roger, and that can be slightly annoying for the other 12. And if I was one of the other 12, I'd be slightly annoyed about that. But I think if you look at us as a region compared to other regions across the south, actually our engagement with the 12 districts and boroughs has been 1,000 times better. There are other upper tier authority leaders who are proactively not wanting to speak to district and borough leaders. And I think that is immature, and I think that leads to poor outcomes. We're doing the very best we can collectively. There'll be a period now between last Friday and November. We'll have a full council meeting in November to discuss it as well. I know that the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Perfect, and I have a fundamentally different view on how many councils we should have. So I don't think we'll reach consensus on that, but that's okay. We'll go through the debate as we should do, and then we'll be looking at some of those granular details, particularly, I think, for us as a council, whoever we end up working collaboratively with in forming that new council, recognising that we're bringing everything to the table. So there's nobody else in Kent who knows what it's like to be running a unitary authority in 2025, unlike the people in this room. Whether in opposition or in power, we're all experiencing that now. So we're having that voice. You know, I speak regularly with Jim McMahon. That didn't lead us to the outcome that we wanted, but I think at least an understanding, and I think it's fair to say, without going into details of subsequent conversations, MHCLG are trying to find, you know, additional things to support our region, recognising we wanted to be at that table, and you know, the decision and the reason given, of course, the fact that we couldn't find a democratic process for the two councils because of the size. That's not a strong decision in my view, but we are where we are with that. Devolution will come, but we just have to wait. And actually, one final positive on this, and I said this, we had yesterday the meeting of it's called the South East 7, so it's the 7 upper tier authorities across the South East region. And there, actually, of course, me and the leader of KCC, we're going to learn from all of you, because you're pressing ahead with us now. So if you do good stuff, we'll steal that. If you do bad stuff, we won't bother doing that. So I take that as one small advantage. I'd rather be in the programme, but the fact that we're not, we can make sure it works even better for ultimately 1.9 million people, but in particular, the 285,000 that we all currently represent.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. I've got Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. So just leading on a little bit around the discussion around devolution. So given the scale of the change that's coming our way and the potential reorganisation, what are we doing to make sure local people feel genuinely heard and involved? And then I've got some slightly more granular questions. We've got the Easter holidays coming up soon. We've made a commitment to stop holiday hunger. How important has that been to residents, and can we sustain it moving forward? And then finally, in terms of our own wonderful staff that we've got here at Medway Council, we've seen big improvements in how staff feel informed and engaged, particularly in the recent staff surveys. What do you think has made the difference? And how are we making Medway Council a place where people actually want to come and work?
Thank you. I'll deal with holiday hunger first. So we know we've got a household support fund for next year. We didn't have to go begging for it. We didn't have to get a cross-party agreement on a letter to government. Government just did it. That's a good thing. What I anticipate, and this is a working assumption, is that we know that we're going to have a multi-year settlement for next year's financial settlement for local government. It's been clear, although it's not been said absolutely explicitly, that the plan will be to roll, I think I heard the figure, something ridiculous, like 400 different grants. Now, some of those are tiny, but some of those are quite substantial. And I'm expecting the vast, vast majority of those to all go in to the household, to the settlement, to the multi-year settlement. So from that perspective, that will give us more flexibility. So two which are pretty high profile at the moment: Household Support Fund, UK Shared Prosperity Fund. In both those cases, and I would say this, wouldn't I, but I think Medway has done an outstanding job. Not necessarily just said by me, but said by people in the LGA. Lauren Edwards raised UK SPF in the Parliament. So from that perspective, getting that, and the Minister agreed, thankfully. So from that perspective, getting that real kind of national recognition, going back to Mark's point, Councillor Prenter's point, around Medway being there, being a voice that's being heard. So I'm hopeful that we will see the ability not only to have that funding guaranteed for 3 years, but also to have further flexibility on that. And I, you know, the Chief Operating Officer and I have spoke about this in the run-up to this year's budget. We had made a provision for Household Support Fund if it hadn't been extended. We didn't ever have to put that anywhere because it got extended before we had to put that out there. So rest assured, it is an absolute priority for this administration. And within Household Support Fund, there are two or three things in particular which I think would be high priority. The food partnership works incredibly well. Absolutely, the ability to give small grants, and there are loads of examples where actually giving a grant of, say, £500 or £1,000 to do something actually not only helps that individual or family, it saves the system much more than that money. So food partnership and the single grants, but also the holiday hunger. I don't anticipate we'll see any legislative change on that from government because, as is well documented, and I'm looking forward to visiting Cliff when it rolls out there as a trailblazer, we're focused very much on breakfast clubs, and I think that's a good thing. I want kids to have a hungry mind, not a hungry belly, when they start their school day. On listening, and I think I'll probably take question 1 and 3 together because it kind of merges into one. So I think for the public at large, I think we're the most transparent and available, accessible this council in its 27-year history has ever been. People may want to challenge that, but I think we are. There's always more to do. So, you know, Medway Matters Live, having a 60-second video, sometimes slightly longer than 60 seconds, video out every single week. We're now moving to a position where we're going to have, we've brought back supplementary questions to council. We're going to have questions to cabinet for the first time ever from the public. So we are very accessible, but we'll always try and do more. We'll always try and do more. And when it comes to staff, one of the proudest moments I've had so far is the initial Our Medway Live, which is the internal staff version of Medway Matters Live. We had 3 of those sessions at the Central Theatre, and myself and Richard were there taking questions, giving a presentation, taking lots and lots and lots of questions. And some of those were about being a Medway Council employee, but some of those, remembering, of course, 80% of Medway Council staff live in Medway, you know, lots of those were just about living in Medway, and that's perfectly good and fine and a great opportunity. So I think the first question at the first session was about potholes. So the residents of Medway, who are the staff of Medway, are not afraid of telling us what they think. And then the final thing on this, as an example for staff, was around the Teams meeting that Richard and I held, a webinar where we had over 1,300 individual logins, and we know some people were watching it as a team, so we estimate that's probably closer to 1,500 people watching that session, which again had questions within it as well. So I like to think we're doing as much as we have done now. Can we do more? We can always do more, and it will always be a priority for me. I said when we first put ourselves forward back for election in 2023, honesty, integrity, openness and accountability. And we're trying to do all of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. I've got Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Vince, for the report and your explanations as normal. Just going through the report, a few things. You mentioned the Medway Matters booklet delivered to every household 3 times a year. Now, I remember at full council once that you wanted to scrap Medway Matters, and I think used the money for red boxes and feminine hygiene, if I remember it correctly. Why the change of heart now you're in administration? If it wasn't any good then, why is it suddenly any good now? So that's one question I'd like you to answer. Just on local government reorganisation, you mentioned that you and Councillor Perfect have a difference of opinion. Is that difference of opinion a 50-50 split across the other 14, or is it, you know, how you said you favour 4, how do the others all favour? You know, I'd just like to get some feel of how everybody feels. And I'm pleased to read the benefits and financial welfare services. That's something that we started in the previous administration, and in its infancy has grown and grown under your administration, and you support it. So I'm very pleased with that, and it seems to be quite successful, along with the Macmillan nurses, etc. Just reading down the report a bit further. Yeah, I mentioned to you last year, and I think I've mentioned it before when we were in the administration, about the homeschooled free meals. And I wonder whether we can actually change our homeschool policy to ensure that those that are deserving of that, I know it's not government policy to give free school meals to people that don't attend school, but I wonder if we could look again at our own homeschool policy to see that those homeschool children that are in need also receive the vouchers during the school holidays. The other thing that caught my eye, because I think I've talked to you about it before, is festivals. We used to have festivals in Cossington Park, and it used to be called the Rainham Spectacular under the good old Gillingham Borough Council days. And we used to have one in the English Festival, but out of all the festivals you cancelled one, and that happened to be in Rainham. When can Rainham get its festivals, have a festival back? You mentioned we've got 5 towns, and Rainham doesn't have a festival. You're trying to launch one in Gillingham, and I think Rainham still deserves to have a festival. So I wonder if you could look at that again.
Sorry, can we allow the question, please? I hear a lot of mumbling. Thank you. Councillor
colleagues
Hockwell.
were questioning some of the facts, but there we go.
No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
I would. Thank you very much. And thank you, as always, Councillor Hackwell, for your questions. So we've cut Medway Matters from 4 to 3. That's the right thing to do when we've got financial pressures. And in part, that's because we're using other tools and techniques to tell residents on that of what's happening. One of the positive things, of course, is we've seen society pick up its pace when it comes to period poverty. There's more work to do there. And actually, we've seen the Hygiene Bank winning Kent-wide awards, the Medway Hygiene Bank. So we're really proud to work with them in partnership. So yeah, it's always a mixed feast. But yes, that was a decision we would have taken at the time. We took a different decision later on, and that's perfectly fine. On LGR and the 14 councils, so some of these letters are in the public domain, some aren't. I think it's fair to say Medway Council's leadership values 4. KCC's leadership currently, at time of speaking, values 3. Who else has declared stuff? West Kent. So West Kent, for those of you, Tunbridge Wells, Tunbridge and Malling, I think have both come out for 3. Dartford, so Jeremy Kite has come out for 4. So there is a real mix. There isn't kind of set purely on, it's not Conservatives think this, Labour think that, because Jeremy thinks the same as me. That's probably the only thing Jeremy and I think the same on. But ultimately, and this is really, really important, and to be fair to councillors of all political persuasions, there's an absolute desire to just go and have the conversation. Let's go and chat to the people of our region. So what you'll see between March and November is a load of conversations. Councils, if the council leaderships have a view, they will be advocating that, which is perfectly acceptable. But you will see, and we were talking about this, we had Kent leaders yesterday, you'll see some communication from the region of Kent, because it will be a mayoral region, so it's not a county, although it's the same geographical footprint. And in part, that's to try and separate it from Kent County Council. So there'll be some region of Kent communications, which will be the 14 councils working together, a bit like the Electoral Commission, where they say, make sure you're registered to vote, make sure you take photo ID, elections are coming. So it'll be, local government is changing, have your say, decision will, options will need to be submitted in November. So we won't give any opinion, so that doesn't sit with any one council, we're all doing that. And we should be getting some funding, we're waiting for the final figure, but it's likely to be around a £1/3 million. That will pay for, across the region, not for one council. That will pay for both, we think, that advertising and some external support to assist all 14 councils. But again, we're waiting to hear back from government on that. I think I've said it, but I'll say it again, just for the avoidance of doubt on welfare and benefit. And they are a brilliant team. Gemma and the team, the award-winning team, they do a great job. I'm not churlish to say that the world started on the first Thursday in May 2023. Stuff was happening before then, some of which I agreed with, a lot of which I didn't. But the good stuff we've kept doing. I'm absolutely relaxed about that. So, yeah, and they are a brilliant team. They've expanded the Macmillan offer at the request of Macmillan, which is fantastic. If we can be helping more people, that is a good thing. So, yeah, they are fantastic. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. On the homeschool policy, I think there's two elements to this. We need to, and it's for ONS committees to decide task groups. If Councillor Howcroft-Scott's committee was to suggest a task group into homeschooling, for example, I think that would be really powerful. We have disproportionate, it's gone up everywhere, so it's not unusual it's gone up, but disproportionately in Medway. And I think getting to the root of some of that, I'm absolutely happy to have the conversation around eligibility for free school meals. There'll be some, I know if there were other people here, they'd tell me there's some processing issues with that because some of it goes through schools. And again, it's the award-winning team that deal with that, of course. But I'm certainly not opposed to that as a principle, but I think there's a wider issue for Medway, which is around how have we got, we're now in 4 figures for the amount of kids who are being homeschooled, and we just need to understand why. That figure will never be 0, and it's absolutely parents' choice to do that, but I think we should be collected, and that's not just happened in the last 22 months, it's been building up. Definitely something post-COVID, but we need to understand that as well. So I think if that's going to happen at some point, I think that would be really, really helpful. And I think that's part of that conversation as we move forward. I'm obliged to say, and I'll get thrown things at my head by Gillingham councillors if I don't mention, of course, when we took control of the council, there was no Will Adams Festival. That was in a town which wasn't having any other festivals. The Love Gillingham Day has stepped in, and that's fantastic. And I think, look, part of this is where other things are stepping in. So the Chatham Carnival and Chatham Chinese New Year, that's driven by the Town Centre Forum. And actually in Rainham, you've got some amazing world-class musicians coming to St Margaret's Church. You've got the Poet Laureate coming to St Margaret's Church. Blimey. And that's more, and I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing some of that. So I do think... and that leans into the bigger piece around actually in the current financial climate, and that's over the last 15 years of local government finance, it means councils have to stop doing some stuff. And actually, we've seen time and again, individuals, organisations, not always, but sometimes stepping in. And of course, yes, we had to take a difficult decision around the English Festival, but also the summer sweeps. That was, and I got more emails about summer sweeps than I did about English Festival, but on both of those, not a huge amount, because I think the offer is still tremendous. We still got the Sweeps Festival. We still got Christmas Dickens. Those are really important things for our community. So losing Summer Dickens, I think I said Summer Sweeps. I meant Summer Dickens if I did say Summer Sweeps. Summer Dickens and English Festival, difficult choices. And I said, at the same time, there are other people saying, please bring back the Will Adams Festival, which I have some sympathy for. But again, until we can find some funding for that, it's not likely to happen in the near future. But if other people want to find that funding, we'll support them in the way that we support things like Medway Pride. That is not and has never been a Medway Council organisational festival, but we want it to succeed and we will support it as we would support, if somebody else stepped up and said, we want to organise the English Festival, the brilliant Paul Cowell and his team, along with Nina as a portfolio holder, Councillor Gurung, I'm sure they'd be up for those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions relating to future government reorganisation. The first is probably one that's probably you would probably more speak to in a personal capacity. But as you were talking about, actually, the 14 leaders of Kent come from various, at least 5 different political colours. And I was just wondering, in terms of your personal view, a vote for a mayor of Kent, would that be sensible to be under the first past the post system, or would it be more sensible and give a wider mandate if we reintroduce potentially alternative votes that have previously been used in mayoral systems? And then a question around local government reorganisation. I think one of the things that I would hope that all would agree with is that Medway, we would want to host the debating chamber of whatever as the largest urban area for whatever council comes forward for this area of North Kent. Obviously, at the moment, we've got Gunwharf. As part of the refurbishment, there were plans to bring from this building, but bring the debating chamber into Gunwharf. Have we done work, particularly because I understand, looking from some of the proposals out there, that we could have a maximum of 100 councillors, so it'd be much bigger, depending on that, to make sure that that space is future-proofed, or there is a space in Medway that is future-proofed to be able to accommodate that, which is slightly bigger than the 59 we've got at the moment. So those were my 2 questions for you today.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Field, for those questions. I'll take the second one first. So it's right that we're proceeding with that work that is ongoing. It will be for the new council, whoever they are, to decide wherever they want to go. I would always advocate for, Medway, with its connectivity, with its almost certainly being at the heart, the centre potentially, depending on which way we look, and that will be for the cartographers to deal with, not me. Hooray for people who love maps. So from that perspective, I think there is a lot of logic to that. Now, others might advocate for their council building, their council chamber. That will be a matter for them. But it ultimately will be a matter for the new council to make that choice. But rest assured, we're still proceeding with that approach, because there is a level of flexibility in the building of that new council chamber, which would allow an increased size of a council. That's a right and appropriate thing to do. And I know that work is ongoing to look at where that would sit as relates to things like technology being available, etc., etc. So that is absolutely in the considerations. The need for a council chamber which is bigger than 59, the current working will allow for that to happen, absolutely. On the issue of how the mayor is elected, so I always get criticised by lots of my Labour colleagues, because I'm quite rare in the Labour Party, that I don't generally like proportional representation. I'm not a fan. But on the issue of single elected roles, I do think alternative vote was working very, very well. It delivered, everyone from Anne Barnes to Boris Johnson. So it doesn't mean I like it because it means my team always wins, but what it does do is it gives that individual a stronger, clearer mandate, which I think in that perspective, for that sort of role is important. So I absolutely would advocate for all directly elected mayors to have that particular process. Other forms of PR and voting are available. That's for other days, and certainly not mostly for my flavour, apart from a second elected chamber in the Houses of Parliament. That's another conversation. That's not the Medway Council position, that's definitely my position. But on the mayoralities, and if we ever have another election for a police and crime commissioner, which I think is unlikely because of timetables, that too should have that alternative vote process, which has served well up to and including the last election, where you can be cynical as to why the previous government might have been that off. They can speak for themselves. I would definitely advocate bringing it back, because it gives that stronger mandate for that individual. Thank you for those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Medway. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Vince, everybody's asking you to talk about the future, but my questions are actually about the past. You brought us a comprehensive report, and thank you for that. And my questions, I'll start with the with just one. Can you tell us what you see as the top 3 successes? The things that you're most proud of for you and the Cabinet to deliver, or you personally, I don't mind. And then we'll go on to the more difficult ones.
So I could list you loads, but in one sense, getting 2 budgets through the council chamber at a time when, particularly for the first budget, Section 114 was a prospect. I wouldn't say a strong prospect, but at points in that conversation, absolutely, I would say that was a challenge. I think the 2 and therefore subsequently the 2 SITFA reports, actually particularly the second one, and I know and appreciate maybe not everyone's read that yet, do take a few minutes out to read that. I think it shows from an independent perspective. So my view will always be a little bit biased, I'm afraid to say, on most things. But having SITFA saying some of the things they did makes me really proud, not of me, but actually of all of us, and particularly the corporate team, the team of 25 working collaboratively. So that is certainly one of the things I would have right up there. I would say having to have a reshuffle, and I say that because in part, when people went to the ballot boxes on July the 4th, people were reflecting on the first 12, 13 months of a Labour administration. And did we get everything right? No, of course we didn't. Of course we didn't. But actually, the ability for people to see the positive changes we're making, the engagement we're having, the fact that we are getting our voice heard, perhaps at a level that we haven't had before, the fact that they've got an administration who recognises the challenges and is not afraid to say, yep, it could be going a bit quicker, yep, we could be doing it in a slightly different way, and we're working towards that, rather than, and this is not a personal criticism of anybody, but the previous administration, everything was fine all the time, from the eyes of the comms. So I think having a more realistic approach, and that gave people confidence when they went to the ballot box to vote for 3 individuals who had been part of that process. So from a personal perspective, actually that gives me a load of pride, because that was if we'd been doing terribly, we'd have 3 different MPs now. That's it, because people vote on what they've been feeling for the last 12, 15, 18, 24 months and further back. And then for me, the third point really, it's got to be, and it's hard because there's been so much. I'll share something because I'm amongst friends. It's only ever been recorded permanently on YouTube. Over at Broadside, when we were given the Ofsted judgment, 2 tears fell down out of my eyes. I'm not afraid to say that, because actually, kids only get one chance, and the system was failing them. And again, that is not a political dig, but the report that we got in 2019 was painful to read, and to get back to that point. And again, going back to the point I made earlier on, Josie Isles definitely played a huge role in that. Clive Johnson played a huge role in that. Donna Marriott played a huge role in that. Leanne Farrack played a huge role in that. But actually, the rest of the corporate management team, successive cabinets played a role in that, because everyone recognised from a pretty terrible place that actually we needed to all do better. So scrutiny's got better. I think governance has got better. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? No, we're not. There's still more to do. And that does mean some tough choices about resources, because we can only spend money once. But I think we've actually taken the recognition and said, we can't pull the resources out now because we've got to good. As for the answers I gave Joe earlier on. So yeah, these things matter. I think about those 500 kids who we are directly responsible for. So yeah, that was an emotional moment, blimey. And we're still making progress. So for me, those are the 3. But there's loads of other great stuff.
Yeah, that's why I gave you the challenge of just 3. That kind of brings me on to an uncomfortable statement, really, because we've seen papers where people thought our children weren't worth pursuing the improvement in that. And that, I think, talks down Medway when people put forward papers that say the opposite to actually what the administration's trying to do, which kind of brings me on to comms. You are doing good things with comms, you're doing different things with comms. But why is that not breaking through? We still have the unfortunate situation of people still not believing that the administration and even what we've come out of isn't the best for Medway, and they're still looking for disruptors. So what are we doing wrong with the comms, and why can we not get it right?
So there's two parts to that. Let me answer the political bit first. I was sat on that side of the chamber for years, and you know, for many years, we didn't put anything as an alternative budget, and we got criticised for that. But part of that, frankly, is about making sure that the whole system works properly. And this is not an individual dig at anybody. This is about the body politic. So if you've got a situation where, you know, there's choices to be made. So you could choose just to go, we oppose your budget, you're chatting a load of nonsense, we do stuff differently, and we go, fair enough, that's fine, then we'd vote. Saying that you would make 36 people redundant, but not knowing who those 36 people are, or what even directorate they would come from, that's difficult, that's a problem. So yeah, that is about, again, responsible opposition. And I really don't say that to have a dig. I say that because we know that more people than any other meeting watch that meeting. So there may be staff who will go, blimey, technically, we're in no overall control now. Most people know that that's not technically true when it comes to how voting happens at the moment because of the suspensions. But actually, people will be worried about, well, what happens if that vote doesn't go through? What happens if that budget doesn't go through? Do we have to go and look at that amendment? So, and I don't, look, opposition groups will do what they need to do, whatever they feel appropriate. I just think from that perspective, and look, we'll take the slingshots of why didn't you make an alternative budget 3 years out of 4 all day long. I don't mind that. But actually, that's the alternative is not worth doing if it's going to lead those levels of difficult questions. And those politicians will have to answer for themselves. On comms, I think there's 2 or 3 things here. I love social media, as people know. I love Facebook. I'm still on X. I should have probably come off there like everybody else, but I'm still on there. I'm on Blue Sky. I have an Instagram account I haven't updated for about 75 years. And it's a really brilliant tool. So just today, I've had 2 people, neither of whom I'm linked with, on Facebook Messenger, saying I need some help. So the ability to go, drop me an email, always drop me an email. I won't take Facebook on Messenger. Drop me an email, we'll get that looked at. That's brilliant. And yeah, I get loads of brickbats thrown at me, and that's fine. But there is a level, even on Facebook now, there is a level of cynicism, and politicians will have a go at each other. That's fine, all day long. That's okay, as long as it stays within the boundary of reasonableness. And people will have different tolerance to what reasonable is. But there is a chunk of people on social media who, even if you said we're going to give £100 to every resident in Medway, they'd go, why is it not £150? Or why am I not getting it as quick as that person over there? So there is a level of sin which I understand if they feel politics has failed them. So it's our collective job, all of our jobs, whoever we are, to kind of rebuild that faith in politics. And for me, that's really important. And that's why we do Medway Matters Live, so people can come and ask questions directly. And I think some of the tools are good. So 1 Minute Medway, which has now been transformed into 60 Seconds Southend by my friends over the estuary. It's really great. It's a great tool. But even on that, there'll be a level of cynicism underneath it. And that's fine. Again, anybody can put whatever they like. That's perfectly fine. But it's around recognising, why do people feel that way? You know, is there a lack of respect for local government, for politicians generally? Maybe. And we can all have our thoughts as to why that might be. I think we do a reasonable job, but there is always more to do. And I think some of that's about using new technologies. I always used to joke, I'm never going to get on TikTok. I might be changing that because there's a lot of people there now who I want to talk to. I want to tell them what a great job is happening here. And I think people get, I hope people get a level of realism. Again, I go back to the point earlier on. Historically, and this is not just Medway, there are loads of councils where bad news never happens. Well, actually, sometimes things do go wrong. We do get it wrong. Things could have been done better. And that's okay to say that. But if you keep making the same mistake again and again and again, that's different. But yeah, we've got stuff wrong. We've got stuff wrong. Of course we have. We're humans. Officers are humans. Councillors are humans. We get stuff wrong. But we learn from that and we make it better next time. And I think for me, the communication of that, whether that's through media, whether that's through social media, I think there's more to do. And again, that's part of the reason why we put some additional resource in to deal with some of those social media elements, to be able to give fairer responses, to fact check a bit as well. You know, and again, in one sense, it almost makes me laugh, but I think some people on social media think I'm on like £1 million a day doing this. Spoiler alert, I'm definitely not. So from that perspective, I get why people are cynical about it. But, you know, and again, I'm not going to blame individual politicians or all the rest of it. It's my job, it's our job to try and change some of that cynicism, to say, actually, you know, Medway is great. Medway is great. But it could be even better still, and we're working collectively hard to make that happen. But there's more to do. Look, comms is not perfect. There's more to do. Absolutely. And it's about a respectful relationship. So I think we have a reasonable relationship with our local democracy reporter. We've got a TV channel 200 metres down the road. We have a reasonable relationship with the newspaper. Lots of communities our size don't have a newspaper at all anymore. I'm really proud that we have the Medway Messenger. Do I like everything they ever print? No, but that's okay because we have free press. Perfectly fine.
Thanks for that. I'm glad that you recognise we need to do more. It is disturbing that all people want is a quick fix with no actual substance to the choices that they're making. So I do agree that dealing in facts, and I think any of the committees that I've sat on, we here want to deal in facts. Unfortunately, the disruptors don't, and therefore we really have a problem with that. And I would urge this council, given the state of democracy, not just reorganisation of local government, but the state of democracy, that we really all need to work very hard to restore some kind of momentum in getting the truth out there. Thanks.
If I can just come back on that, Chair. I mean, look, if I spent all my time coming back on every comment that's got my name on it in social media, I would do nothing else. But the one thing I do call out is where people talk about corruption and bribery. There is not a councillor or an officer, as far as I am concerned, in this council engaging in either of those things. And I will not accept anybody making accusations about me, my cabinet, our corporate management team, our planning committee. Everyone has integrity. I've no doubt of that. So I will call that out. And it doesn't matter who's being accused of that, from any side, any one of the 59 of us. That's not happening in Medway. I've got absolute confidence in that. So yeah, you can say the ponytail thief is at it again. I'm probably not going to challenge you on that. If you're saying planning committee members are taking brown envelopes, I'm going to call you out on social media. That's not true. Our planning committee, you know, I agree with some of their decisions, I don't with other. It's a quasi-judicial legal process. So making accusations like that on social media is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Spring.
So, I'm just going to, I was applauding you because I actually echo those sentiments that you just said right at the end there. So thank you. And there was another thing that as well shows that you do have an actual human side, despite what some people think of you, Vince, when you said about the tears rolling down your face. Again, it is those things, that do touch us as individuals as well. So we may be politicians and everything else, but we are actually also human, and some people sometimes need to think that. I liked the report, by the way. I did read it, and I liked what I read. There is a distinction, and the reason I'm giving this distinction is because people who are here may not be completely au fait, but there's a distinction between homelessness and street homelessness. And the street homelessness are, as it says, really those who are living on the streets. Medway, sadly, has the largest number of homelessness and vulnerably housed people within the whole of the Kent region. There's approximately 1,500. And that figure, according to one of the sources, which is called Caring Hands, is saying that that's also increasing, which is slightly worrying. Another part of that is that those who are street homeless are at present all male and all aged over 25 years old. Again, quite concerning because we talk about a lot about young people, and we kind of have a cut-off age of 25. We shouldn't be neglecting those that are above 25. It's been a practice of this council, many councils up and down the country, of when there's severe extreme cold weather, we go out and we give that support. There's nothing about, and we are hopefully going to get some sun one day, there's nothing about doing the same really with regards to warmer weather. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you can do, because there's nothing mentioned in the report with regards to that I saw. So I'm concerned about the number of people that are homeless in Medway. And is there any additional support that we as a council can provide to those who are street homeless in particular?
Thank you for those kind words. And just, I know if Councillor Lawrence was here, he'd probably, the first question he'd ask me is, are you enjoying the job? And actually, from that perspective, giving that opportunity to say what's going on today, absolutely I do. And again, Councillor Field would be right in saying most of this sits with Councillor Llewellyn Prenter, who's doing a fantastic job in that portfolio. But let me say a couple of bits. So I think in our first summer, so 2 summers ago nearly, we had to use SWEP, as it's known, Severe Weather Emergency Protocol, because of heat. And I was chatting to friends from One Big Family. So they won an award last night over in Ashford, and I came back with them and we were chatting about all sorts of stuff. And we were talking about the fact that probably in the next 5 to 10 years, SWEP will be probably used as much in July and August as it is in December and January. And what are we all collectively thinking about that? So it has been used, even in our time. I'm not sure before 23, it probably was, but certainly it was in 2023 itself. So absolutely, it's on the radar. If we've done that, we would do that again. Interestingly, the feedback I had from, again, the One Big Family team who manage our winter night shelter is actually they've seen an increase in females. So they have seen an increase in females this particular winter. So that's, again, that poses questions as to what do we do about that. If you think particularly about the focus we have on ending violence against women and girls, there are some specific elements there. And they are a brilliant team. I do think we're probably getting to the point, because the winter night shelter finishes in 2 weeks' time, and there are, on average, 25 people a day getting a bed there at the moment. Most of those will still need a bed in 2 weeks' time. The other, again, anecdotal conversation as we were going along, an increasing number of people using those beds are from outside Medway. And that's got housing implications because of who's got duty. So housing duty, you know, Medway will always be compassionate, but we have to follow the law. And if Tunbridge Wells or Maidstone have got duty, they should be discharging that in the same way that we do. Now, sometimes that means, regrettably, placements out of area, as has been well documented. And we know placements out of area come to Medway, not least former tax offices in the intra area, for example. So all of that in the mix says, I've got absolute confidence we've got a brilliant portfolio holder who took over from another brilliant portfolio holder in the Shaba Khan MP. We've got a brilliant head of housing in Bex Wilcox who is doing a fantastic job, not least shown by the inspection, of course, as us as a social landlord last year. But this is absolutely a challenge, and the temporary accommodation is part of that. There is a challenge around the fact that some people just don't want to engage in the system. That's a small number, but that is a challenging number. And then it is about recognising you're right to raise this, Councillor Spring, that, of course, homelessness is absolutely about sofa surfing as well, and all the elements there. And again, I think our housing team are doing a really good job of trying to make sure wherever practically possible, we get the assistance to people who need the assistance. And recognising that there are certain statutory things around actually 35 and under as well for housing. So from that perspective, that can be a challenge too. So definitely on the radar. As council leader, you know, if I'd been given a top 10 rather than a top 3, the social housing inspection would have been in there. Not least because, again, actually we heard directly from residents. They were part of that inspection process, and they spoke very highly as to the approach our team takes, particularly, of course, in Gillingham and Raynham, but not exclusively, because that's where the vast majority of our housing is. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mills. Just one for me, you know, and I will commend you for bringing in SIPFA to have a look at the difficult financial position we find ourselves. Now, SIPFA have got a view on the reliance on exceptional financial support. And I'm sure in a recent report there will be recommendations with regards to that. So I just want to know what your position is. And it might be a good idea for that report to come to this committee at some point in time. And what are you doing about some of the recent recommendations? And the second question is to do with LGR, local government reform. You mentioned that $250,000 is being allocated to all council. However, in our recent budget, we allocated $450,000 to this council for local government reform. What are we spending that money on? How many are we employing new people, researchers? What's the medium salary? How many are we going to employ? Are we having a new office? I just want to get an idea what we're spending $450,000 on, Councillor Maple.
Councillor Tijan, if you're getting all of that for £450,000, I want to come to your shop. So on SIPFA, I mean, I think absolutely it's your committee. So if you wanted to bring an item on the SIPFA report part 2, absolutely, you know, it's your committee. Or whether you want to tie that in with perhaps your next FIT plan review, because clearly the two go hand in hand. And as you would anticipate, as we review the FIT plan, that will be with the kind of helpful recommendations from the SIPFA report too. From my perspective, I was pleased with a lot of the narrative in there. You'll see it, you'll read it, you'll come to your conclusions. And there were no surprises in there. And actually, that is something I would say about all of those kind of external inspections and visits throughout those times. And again, this is where, if you think back to 2019 and the children's services, there was a collective shock at that report. Nothing in the reports we've seen since I was last sat here, whether that's adult social care, whether that's social housing, whether it's the SIPFA report, all of those are kind of saying we're on the right track, we know what we're doing, we know our problems, we know where there are solutions needed. And that makes me as council leader very pleased to say actually we're not out of touch with what's needed to happen. And again, part of that's around excellent officers. And I would say I've got an excellent cabinet. They're all working hard. And it's regular conversations. And it's that collaborative approach. I think both of those help. So certainly on that, you know, it's your committee. But if you wanted to bring the SIPFA report to here, absolutely, I think that would be helpful. I always welcome the views of this committee, in particular from my political portfolio perspective. On LGR, so as I say, I don't think the figure's been absolutely confirmed yet. We're likely to get that firmed up shortly, but of course that's for our region, and we will help, shape and confirm how that's going to be spent. We're going through, for example, a collective process which is initially being pulled together by Richard and the 13 other chief executives, and that will be brought forward to Kent leaders in due course. The budget, which I was very proud to vote for, involved some additional spend on both, as it is now, of course, local government reorganisation and potential preparations for devolution as well. That does mean a number of new staff. I'm very happy through a briefing note to give you the staffing structure that has just been signed off, I think, in the last 7 to 10 days. I saw an email with that on, and rather than try and search for that email now, we'll just get that to you. In part, of course, they won't just be dealing with LGR, and part of this is around recognising that everyone who's currently doing work on LGR, so particularly, I paid tribute particularly to Richard Hicks, to Phil Watts, to Pupinda Gill, and to Celia Glyn Williams, all of those, supported by Adam Bryan actually, all of those are supporting the LGR conversations. But as you may be aware, all of them are pretty busy with their day job. So there is a capacity issue. And if you look at KCC, they have a small army, but an army of really good, talented policy officers and others who are able just to lean in, and that's effectively their day job. So from that perspective, it's about making sure that the brilliant officers here can lend their advice and support and professional knowledge and expertise to that process. We need that. The region needs that, because actually we know how to do unitary authorities, but actually making sure that we've got some additional capacity to support that in place. And of course, those officers, when they are recruited, will be known to this team. But I say, I'm very happy through the Vice Chair, if that was a briefing note that was required, that could be probably dealt with. I could probably send you the email myself, but I won't do that. I'll be a good, well-behaved council leader. But I would suggest that, and we can get that to colleagues. But it's a small team. I think 4. I'm looking to Phil Watts here to nod or shake a head. 4 additional staff? In fact, if Phil might want to get... I was trying to not bring anybody else in, but I will bring, because Phil will be able to tell you. And that will save a briefing note, probably.
Thank you. Would you like to come in, Phil?
Yeah, thank you. So I've been working with, as you say, other colleagues, Celia, Adam, to formulate the team that we're going to use that resource for. We're looking at head of service, 4 policy officers, some admin support and some communication support within that funding package.
Briefing, that's the efficiency of this administration. I've saved you a briefing note. There you go. You don't have to read that now. Thank you, Phil, and thanks for that question. Very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just a point of clarification, really. On a number of occasions lately, we've been talking about the improvement in children's services. Going back to 2019, when I was the chair of the CYP, nobody was more surprised than I was when you got the inadequate Ofsted rating. Because previous to that, the directors of education had told us nothing to worry about. Everything's fine, don't worry about it. And of course, when the bombshell hit, we was stunned. On the intervening years, the department didn't suddenly become good in 2023.
No.
It didn't suddenly become good. An awful lot of hard work went on under the previous administration, but it seems to have been airbrushed out. A lot of work done by Josie Isles and Martin Potter, and dare I say myself, as chair of the CYP, we worked exceptionally hard. And I think it's fair to say that the councillors were better trained in those intervening 4 years with the scrutiny that went on, and the number of scrutiny sessions we had, deeply diving into the data, all helped. And of course, we had shed loads of money coming from reserves for social workers and et cetera, So I just wanted to make it clear, in the interest of getting the facts out, that a lot of work was done, or the majority of the work done in raising the standards of the Children's Department was done under the previous administration, and you came in just in a few minutes of extra time at the end to get all the glory. But thank you for your indulgence, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Point of information. Councillor Maple referred to Josie Isles by name. He referred to chief officers by name. He referred to members of this party that are no longer part of the council. So, Councillor Kemp, nobody is airbrushing anything out of this. Councillor Maple actually acknowledged that that work, exactly as you said, started. I don't know how that was missed, but just for a point of clarification, if you go back and listen to it, he did acknowledge that.
I think for the avoidance of doubt, I use the word, it would be churlish to say the world started on the first Thursday of May. I know that because I've said that quite a lot. Because it's true, true.
Yes, you did, Councillor Maple.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Brown for her point
Thank you, Councillor Brown, for your clarification. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on local government reorganisation, it's been put into the local domain about the supplementary submission from Canterbury, Maidstone, Sevenoaks, Tunbridge and Morning and Tunbridge Wells councils concerning basically who they want to group up with to form these new councils. And from looking at the maps from our perspective, the options are Medway, Gravesham and Dartford, or Swale, Medway, Gravesham and Dartford. And what I mean by that is the 3 option or the 4 option. So my question to the leader is, does he support either of those 2 options? And who does he wish to buddy up with? What other councils does he want to join with to form these new mega councils? Thank you.
Well, I think Medway's a mega council for the avoidance of doubt. I think it's a mega place to live, work, learn and visit, but including the fabulous Hoo Peninsula, of course. Look, so there was an option for all councils, if they chose to be part of that supplementary process. We chose not to, as did KCC, and the majority of councils didn't. The main reason, actually, for me was about the very clear message from both the Minister and civil servants that the March the 21st deadline was light touch. You know, it wasn't supposed to be a full submission with all of the information. In simple terms, and I know most people will know this, but let me just, for the avoidance of doubt, be clear on this. When we get to November, we're going to effectively be asked 3 questions. We already know the answer to 2 of those questions. Question number 1 is, do we want a single council for this region? Now, no current, as far as I'm aware, no currently elected politician, certainly no council leader, is advocating for 1 or indeed for 2 councils. So we know the answer to that. The second question we know the answer to is, do we have any councils which will go outside our region? Now, the good people of Dover might want to have a local authority with Calais, I don't know, but no one has raised that yet. So as far as I'm concerned, and actually more seriously, of course, for Tunbridge Wells, that might have been a conversation. But nobody there is advocating for that. Now, for other parts of England, both of those are completely legitimate conversations. If you are a county of 600,000 people, you might go, let's just become a unitary. Now, the districts and boroughs may have a view on that as well in that place, and that will be a conversation for them. Similarly, where some of the regions will end up, it may well be that some unitaries will go outside those regional boundaries. Those are legitimate questions to ask. They're actually quite easy for our place. So then you get into the detail, which we'll get into between now and November. Who do I want to buddy up with? Well, let's say I love all of the council leaders. I don't agree with all of them, particularly out of those 4, particularly Jeremy Kite. He himself, like us, has his own rack problems, as we well know. But look, ultimately, it will be for MHCLG and the Minister to decide who we will end up with. Work will continue to look at that. As I said earlier on, it's not particularly on cross-party basis because Jeremy is advocating for 4 as well. So it's not like there's a Conservative view and a Labour view. I think most Labour colleagues want 4 for lots of different reasons across the region. But I'll work with whoever, well, subject to the Labour Party selecting me to be a candidate and then being elected, and then being part of a group of councillors looking at that moving forward, that will be who I'll work with. But the most important thing is I reflect back on all of that, and I reflect back on this elsewhere. I'd do nothing I would do without the residents of Chatham Central and Brompton. I wouldn't lead this council. I wouldn't speak for local government on the CEMR. I wouldn't sit on the LGA board for Linz if it wasn't for the people of Chatham Central and Brompton. And for all cabinet members and opposition spokes, we do those additional roles. They're important to do, but ultimately we're all responsible to our immediate electorate. So I'll do nothing with any council in the future if people don't select me to be a candidate, and that will be for party members. I'm a proud Labour Party member and will only ever be a member of the Labour Party and the Cooperative Party. And then obviously it'll be for Jim McMahon ultimately to decide who my buddies will be with in those circumstances. But we'll work with whoever.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. I don't have any other member. So, Vice Chair, we have a recommendation on page 15. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I move recommendation 1.1 at page 15. The committee is asked to note the report and also the request for a briefing note on the LGR team structure and remit. No, that was good.
No. Briefing.
Oh, and to bring SIPFA to a future meeting.
Is that supported?
Yes. Chair, thank you.
Councillor Jones. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
I agree.
We will have a 5-minute comfort break. Welcome back, members. We go into agenda item 6. I asked for this report to come to this committee, and I want to thank officers for bringing it forward. I will now ask Samantha Bagfairley, Chief Organisation and Culture Officer, to introduce the report. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out the response to the members' item that was raised by Councillor Tejan in relation to sickness absence for Medway Council and provides an overview of the sickness absence rates as well as the support that's in place to address this. For the period of January to December 24, our sickness absence rate sits at 10.44 days lost per full-time equivalent. This equates to just over 22,000 sickness days lost during this period. Mental health, stress and anxiety makes up a quarter of the sickness days lost within this period. Since our last employee engagement survey, we've been focusing on improving the wellbeing offer for our colleagues. 13% of our colleagues told us that they do not think we provide enough mental health support, and 12% of our managers told us they do not feel equipped to deal with mental health concerns. Given the high figure and the concerns from the staff survey, our sickness absence continues to be a priority, and we've carried out a recent deep dive into the sickness absence. This has led to a policy review, simplified procedures, contractual reviews, as well as additional training for leaders. This new approach will be fully presented to Employment Matters Committee in May. Whilst we have the overarching workforce strategy supporting a number of key actions, we'll also be producing a wellbeing framework to capture all of the initiatives in one place to make sure that we can evaluate these, monitor them and ensure that this is reducing our sickness absence rates. Members are asked to note the content within the report, and I'm happy to take questions or further suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Sam, for your report. I think there's some good detail in wellness in there, in the fact that, you know, I like the idea of finishing meetings, an hour meetings at, after 50 minutes and stuff like that. It's a good policy to have so that, you know, people don't have to try and rush from one meeting to the next in a nanosecond. I think I welcome things like that. The one that caught my eye was the walking meetings. In fact, we all remember a couple of years ago, Nicola Bully, that was allegedly on a Teams call and tragically lost her life up in Wye. And I wonder whether you've done any thought of, you know, if you're encouraging people to walk and talk, and it might not be a river, it might be traffic, it might be all sorts of things. I just a little bit nervous about that because, you know, although it sounds good, because people are, you know, can listen to meetings and things, but I'm a bit concerned about the conversation, the safety aspect of that. If I look at the appendices and the data, you know, some of that astounds me in the fact that we've got, you know, 21 full-time day equivalent from Regen, you know, lost. That's a hell of a lot. You know, it really does stand out on the graph. So I wonder if there's any more deep dive than that. But the one that concerns me the most is the reasons not stated. There's over 2,000 days of reasons not stated for work, and some of that is for long-term sickness. Now, I don't know what the definition is, your definition is for short-term sickness and long-term sickness, but I'd like to know that. And how can we have people, and I can understand if they took a day off, you might not understand, you know, quite what's wrong with them, but if they're on long-term sick, surely we should know what's wrong with them. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. So the walking meetings predominantly have been where we've been in Gunwharf. So we've actively encouraged meetings as groups of people going out together. Take your point around the health and safety, and there's probably something we should be putting in place, particularly if people are starting to put that into teams. So I'll take that away and make sure we build that into the policy that we have. The reasons not stated, there's a couple of reasons for this, which we are focusing on within the new policy. One is we do need to have reasons not stated to protect dignity of people. So there could be a particular health issue that people do not want recorded in the system. Now, typically that might be a private decision, perhaps around pregnancy. It might be somebody who's going through realignment, a gender assignment, you know, so that there is a number of things that people wouldn't want recorded in the system. That's not to say their line manager and their leadership wouldn't be having those conversations and supporting them appropriately. I agree that the number is too high, so part of our deep dive has been looking into the reasons why. And what we found is there's two things for that. One is when somebody first goes off sick, sometimes they're not diagnosed with what's wrong with them, so it's often blank, and we don't put the reason on the sickness on the form at that point. When we define long-term sickness, it's 4 weeks, and sometimes people are still not diagnosed at 4 weeks, and it would mean going back into the system to update it, and we found a procedural error where that's not happening. Part of our system now moving forward is line managers have much more autonomy to be able to go back and correct those files and update those files. So that figure will reduce, but we've got to change the policy around that process to make sure we're not missing that opportunity to go back and update that record. But we've also, I think, got to build a bit of trust within people not wanting their data into the system and making sure people understand why we use it and the purpose of it and the fact that their data is protected.
The only thing I'll add, if I may, Chair, is, you know, I understand you're probably still paying them over that period. You know, they have to really be, you know, if you're an employee, actually genuinely, you know, saying, you know, even if it's a private conversation and you write down, seen with Occy Health or something like that, at least, you know, there's acknowledgement we do actually know what it is. Can we do something like that?
Yeah, so as a line manager, you will have an attendance management plan that you manage with the individual that will contain much more detail around the personal conversation, the support that's put in place, the reason for the sickness. What we record in the system is almost a drop-down menu of the purpose of the sickness. There is no further detail within the system, and that is for monitoring purposes from the centre. So probably in my whole time being at Medway, there's probably maybe only been 2 cases that have been brought to my attention where an individual hasn't wanted to share their medical information at the time. And, you know, it's taken a lot between the line manager and individual to build up the trust to be able to do that, but that's not a common occurrence within Medway. And most definitely, I'm very confident that line managers are managing sickness and having those conversations through those individual, you know, private attendance management plans.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, the 10.4 figure, I take it that's the arithmetic mean. I'd be interested to know what the mode and median are as well. I think that might be quite telling. I appreciate you probably haven't got that to hand.
No, apologies, I don't have that at hand, but happy to circulate.
Thank you. Councillor Hucker-Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, disabled people and vulnerable people are entitled to reasonable adjustments. Do you count that in recording sickness? Because sometimes, as you said, you know, you don't often have a diagnosis straight away. You know, you wait to see your GP, then you get into the system, and it could be 6 months, 8 months at the moment to see a specialist and get a diagnosis. Are you confident that you're looking after people while they're in that kind of system? And obviously, you know, it's the trade union movement that gave us sick pay and workers' rights, which I think is much better than the Elizabethan poor laws where we're begging for money. But are you confident we're doing all we can to look after our workforce when they're poorly?
Thank you. I'm confident our policies, tools and procedures lean themselves to make sure that we look after the workforce very well. We have a number of reasonable adjustments that we can put into place. We have very good contracts with occupational health as well as Care First to make sure there is support for people, and we do maximise the use of access to work. We also do extend our trigger points around the policy. So typically we have trigger points where we would then be taking formal action. Those trigger points are not taken forward if there is mitigating circumstances circumstances, an operation waiting, a diagnosis waiting, and again, that's a personal conversation. Am I confident we're doing it fully everywhere? Probably not, if I'm being honest. So if I look at the HR cases, and if I'm being transparent today, I think there is improvement we can make. And the new policy that we've put in place, as well as the procedures, also picks up some additional training for managers. And I think we've really got to help managers manage these cases better and know that a policy is there for guidance, but there is that room within that around those particularly difficult cases. There's lots of flexibility in our policy because it doesn't fit everybody for the circumstance that they present. And as you mentioned, people are often waiting quite some time. We work very well with our occupational health provider. We have regular meetings to review why people are going to occupational health. And we don't just rely on the data for people being sick. So, there's a number of things we need to look at. We need to look at the reasonable adjustments we're having to put in place, the occupational health referrals, why they're going forward and what's coming out as that as a result. But then also the additional support people might be seeking. So we have a Healthy Mind and Wellbeing group. So that group is constantly looking at how we can develop the wellbeing framework to make sure that our offer does extend beyond. One of the other things we're looking at is from a health package, we have separate contracts at the moment. So we have counselling through Care First, for example. We have the occupational health who do the triaging of the medical condition. We also have access to people to get eye care vouchers. So we're looking at pulling all of those contracts together to see if we can get a more up-to-date option that would be fit for purpose for people. So our contracts are up for renewal in a short period of time, and we'll be reviewing that in light of the information that we've recently found out. So more to do. I think our policies are strong. I think the tools are strong. I think we can do more with the contracts, and I think we can invest more in our managers to give them the capability.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I have Councillor Prenter and then Councillor Spring.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I'd like to say is, it's made a big noise about the pay deal, about the 5%, but there's more in that pay deal than just about the money. There was the Cycle to Work scheme, there was the Wellness Day that hopefully would start to contribute to lowering these numbers. But are we involving, I know you mentioned the one group, but are we involving the wider employees in this strategy, in what they would like to see, and their mental health strategy going forward, including the trade unions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Health and Wellbeing group that have come together are volunteers from across the council who represent all of the people within the council. So very much like we use our Medway Makers group, they are a voice for everybody. They will go back and do the consultation on parts. They will go back to the services and talk to them about the things that are coming forward. So one of the things that they were instigating last year that landed and came from the organisation was the Press Pause campaign. Because again, from the survey, we were noting that people were not taking regular breaks. So the organisation, from the feedback we got, they didn't feel they could. So it's really important that we've done some education around the importance of pressing pause and having those breaks. So every initiative that the group's taken forward is a result of the voice of the organisation. Anything that we are pushing forward, we consult with the trade unions. We have fortnightly keeping in contact meetings with the trade unions, as well as quarterly consultative meetings and the joint consultative meeting before EMC.
Thank you. Chair, if I could have one more question, and then I've got a proposal for a recommendation as well. If I can ask the question first. Mental health first aiders, very important, quite new though, in workplaces. What support are we giving to them mental health first aiders? One for their own development and also one for their own well-being as well, because if they're getting a lot of work, that's something, are they really equipped for? What support are we giving them?
Just before Christmas, we engaged with an external company who specialises in wellbeing, and as a corporate management team, we've done a separate session that looked at what we might need as a senior leadership team to build that resilience and understanding around our own wellbeing and what we need to do within the organisation. And one of the areas that we looked at was the mental health first aiders. So we're now working with this particular provider to look at what we can do to bring in some expertise externally to support this particular network. We know that we've had the increase in the budget, which is very welcome around our training budget, so it allows us to put forward much more of a corporate offer to some of those key staff that are occupying other roles for us. So we haven't done much to date, but we have got the programme available, and I'm happy to bring that along to EMC to share what that looks like.
Yes, please, thank you. So, Chair, if I can make a recommendation, I think it's important, even though we are working with the staff and the trade unions, that we've reinforced that as a recommendation.
So my recommendation is to work with staff, including our recognised trade unions, to develop staff wellbeing strategies to continue to reduce sickness and to improve wellbeing and to ensure we are, as an employer, continue to benefit our employees.
Thank you, Chair. And mine's kind of somewhat cynical, really. Looking at the figures for the short and long-term sickness on page 44, August, we see a sharp rise in the number of long-term absence. Sorry? It goes... Because it then drops, the short term. Yeah. You see, I call that more people. I consider that as well. I read that as more people are on long-term sick over that period. Am I incorrect then? Okay, then I'll stop with that. The way I've read that, and then that's possibly incorrect, and I do apologise then, but I read that as it was more people who are actually off on that, and therefore I was wondering whether or not there was something that you could review to analyse that. But if I'm wrong, then apologise. Sorry. Ignore me.
Thank you, Councillor Spring. Councillor Kemp, and then Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, I was looking at the same graph, and it seemed to me that it's bound to be like a mirror graph, because presumably after somebody's been off sick for 4 weeks, they suddenly become long-term sick. So I can understand how it diverges. I can't quite understand how it converges. So after August, when it comes down, if you're off sick for long term, you can't suddenly become short-term sick, can you? Could you possibly explain the right-hand side of that graph? If you don't
Sam,
mind?
would you like to respond?
No, absolutely. If you're long-term sick, you can't then become short-term sick, but there could be new cases that have become short-term sick as those people who are long-term sick have returned. So hence why then that could be the difference. So, you know, we're forever in a moving picture of both long-term and short-term around different people, aren't we? But you are correct in the short-term becomes the long-term in most cases.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say I welcome the measures which have been looked at by the corporate management team, particularly mental health awareness training, enhancing mental health awareness training for all employees. I welcome that. But also I particularly welcome that line managers will be receiving mandatory mental health awareness training. I think that's really important. Anyone that's managing employees needs to have that training. And also mandatory one-to-one sessions. I think that's really important because you will, a lot of the time, early intervention is the best way. So if you're having those one-to-one sessions, you will pick up on things and be able to intervene at the start before situations develop and get worse potentially. I would like to see all three of those things actually statutory across the entire country with public and private organisations to provide that training and provide that awareness and support. So just a comment really, just to say that's really good to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Would you like to respond?
No, I suppose just thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We have, you know, spoke to individuals, and again, as I mentioned during the staff survey, some of our managers were telling us they didn't feel equipped to deal with it, so we've had to put some intervention in to support them.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Brake.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for a very interesting report that's been prepared and presented this evening. The one issue I would like to raise or bring to the attention of the committee, please, and yourself, is with regard to mental health, which is in fact so important. And it's been several years now that I think it was the MP at the time was, or the minister was, I can't remember his first name, but Lamb, who made it very clear that mental health and physical health should be treated in parity. because everybody seems to know if you've got a broken leg or an arm or whatever, then it can be seen. But mental health is one of these invisible illnesses, if I can describe it like that, that really does need to be dealt with. Since COVID, in fact, and the shutdown and what have you, it has been documented that whilst many people were encouraged to work from home, there were several individuals who had difficulty in actually doing that because of they missed what was available in the office environment, the fact that they had day-to-day contact with individuals, and in fact it was a totally different environment that people were working in, and sometimes they were, I'm saying being encouraged, I think in many cases it was a case of you want to work, you've got to work from home. And Medway Council, in fact, was one of the organisations that made it very easy for people to work from home by providing all the necessary equipment and IT that was available, and 10 out of 10 to Medway. But I suppose really the point I'm coming to is, has experience shown that there, now that people are almost back to work on a permanent basis using the traditional method of coming into the office most of the time, are there still individuals out there that are reluctant to return to the workplace and need to be encouraged to bring them on? And equally, are there cases of mental illness being reported within the system, please, by such people?
Thank you. Councillor Brake.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess there's two ways on this in the sense that working at home does give respite and gives you opportunity to do your work without being interrupted. So people have appreciated that. But then also working at home, there's that presenteeism, and it's a culture of always being available, and there's no then cut-off between work and home life. So being at home could have a lot of pressure for you in that way. And I think, if anything, from the staff survey, the two things that stood out for us was one around their kind of people losing their boundaries. So it's nice to have the flexibility, but it's too easy to work longer hours or not take those breaks because you're in your home environment. And then the other one is social isolation. That was contributing, and that was reported in the survey that we had a number of people who were experiencing social isolation. And that's been one of the reasons that we haven't moved to home working contracts. Now, we do have a handful of those, but they are legacy from previous. But the majority of our contracts are hybrid, which means people have the opportunity to have equipment that can enable them to work at home as well as come into an office environment. Prior to Gunwharf and the situation with RAC, the building was very vibrant, lots of people in the workplace, and the hybrid work model was the one that was maximised the most. So I would say that I think we did strike quite a happy balance around that. Most definitely for leaders, there is a challenge around keeping in contact with people who are not appearing in the office as frequently as perhaps we would like. We have said it is down to services to determine the frequency of which somebody might come into the office because of the business need. We've had a handful of cases where people have challenged that and said, why do I need to come in? And we've given a very compelling argument around people working with others, learning, bringing apprenticeships in and apprenticeships learning from others, and the role you play as a team member in being present and part of that. So I don't think we have a major issue with people not wanting to come in. And if anything now, where we've managed to really occupy Gunwharf in its purest sense, where we've managed to bring more people in and open up more available desks, I would say probably only Fridays is the kind of quiet day, and the other days are really vibrant, and the car park is always full as well as the desks that are in there. So I'm confident we're striking the right balance. Have we got everybody? Probably not, and I think that is down to line managers to make sure they've got proper keeping in contact processes there for individuals. We have had other situations whereby, and I think I've shared it in the Employment Matters Committee, whereby somebody's been on a Teams call and something's happened in the home environment that we found out about because the fact they've been on a call, and we wouldn't have known that had we not had insight through that Teams call in that situation. So in a way, it's given us probably more opening into how somebody might be working, their home life and the situation, and the line manager might have been able to glean more off of that and build up more trust with them. So in overall, I think we don't have a problem. I think managers have a tough job making sure people are coming in regularly. It's easy for people not to come in once they stay away. But it's making sure that when we do the Gunwolf refurb, it's given us the purpose to bring teams together. And that's the reason we're encouraging people to come in. We also know that we've got a lot of people who don't have suitable home working environments. And that's probably been one of our other biggest battles, making sure that people are not sitting on the edge of a bed working with a laptop. So because of their health and safety, it's our priority to make sure that if they are working at home, they have suitable home working facilities as well. So we have made sure that that is in place as well. So a very big topic, one that we're reviewing at the moment with the Gunwolf situation and the design of the new building. But I do think we've got quite a reasonable balance, and the majority of our staff are working in the hybrid model. But the days in which they come in varies service to service depending on that service need.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask for some further explanation just about a couple of the data in a number of the charts. So under total sickness days lost by division, children's services appears to be quite significantly higher. And then if we go to average days lost per FTE by division, regeneration stands out at 21.97. And then just moving on to the breakdown of short-term and long-term sickness, again, education and SEND and regeneration stand out as significantly higher. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more around if that's related to stress or if there are other circumstances that are creating those significantly different data for those areas within the council.
Yeah, thank you. So Children's Services is our largest directorate. So the average days lost, one of the things we've discussed across the DMTs when we go out to present the data is whether or not we can show it as a percentage against the size of the overall workforce. And that might give a more true indication in terms of those days lost as a percentage. As Regen, as you can see, is a much smaller directorate, and therefore the figures are not comparing. In terms of the reasons for the sickness, stress and anxiety and mental health tend to be the top reason for most of for all of our directorates actually, and that contributes to the overall situation. However, as you start to go into smaller directorates, it seems to be cancer is quite high as a reason, then followed by surgery. So each directorate management team has their data down to the directorate level, which goes down to an assistant director level. And if there's cause for concern or any patterns that we're identifying, then we do a deep dive into those areas and do more analysis. So at the moment, we only have it, if you ask me today, I could only give it to you by directorate area, but we could go away and do a deep dive if that was needed. And we have in children's in particular, because of the high level, done that more recently and had somebody come in who's focused solely on the sickness management absence and has worked with managers, particularly along their long-term cases.
No, I don't need any data. I just want to ensure that we are supporting all those staff effectively.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton and Sam. I got Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. It's just just a brief one, really, because in my previous life, this was my stock in trade, about looking at graphs. Do you have any comparison between Medway's performances with other local authorities, or do you have any, or can you get a hold of it in perhaps in a briefing note maybe, if you can't give me the answer straight away, of how it compare with other large organisations of a similar size to Medway in the sort of, I was going to say the real world, but you know what I mean, you know, in industry, shall we say. That would really be interesting. I'm sure you haven't got the figures at your fingertips, but if you can have a briefing note or just an email, that would satisfy my peculiar mind. Thanks.
Sam, would you like to respond?
I belong to a Kent HR network. We regularly look at data and look across for proactive learning and good practice. We are one of the highest across Kent in terms of our sickness, so I can share that this evening. In terms of comparable data compared to other large organisations, I would have to take that away and come back with a briefing note for that. In terms of our ambition and where we want to go, we know from a CIPD report that was taken place last year, which was the Welfare and Workplace Assessment assessment, typically on average, full-time equivalents are losing about 7.8 days. So that gives you an indication of our direction of travel and the inroads that we've got to make. So, you know, to bring it down to at least 8 average full-time equivalent days of 8 would be beneficial to us. So in terms of other benchmarking, we are looking at the national average as well.
Yeah, the figure that really surprised me was the breakdown of long-term to short-term. It's roughly 60-40, isn't it? And that seems a bit high to me. I'm just wondering how it compares with others. That was all.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Hamilton.
So just if we look at one of the, we've got surgery, cancer, stress and anxiety making up the majority of long-term sickness absence days. I think that's fairly evident why it's high.
It wasn't meant as a criticism. It just meant as that I'm surprised that they got the number of long-term sicknesses is 60%. That was all. I'm not criticising or questioning the reasons for it. I'm just saying it seemed a bit high to me. And I just wondered how that compares with other similar authorities. That was all.
Thank you. Sam, is that something you can take away? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thanks for the report. It is insightful, but it's not unexpected. The one thing I will say for Medway Council is we are looking at it, we are addressing it, and I am thankful that it has come to this committee. But lots of things have come to this committee, which I think we can just about talk about here in terms of linking up cause, effect, and external things. Councillor Hackwell will know this. When we had the report from James about internal audit and the adjustments that were needed to the work plan, it's a very small team, and it is over, like it's a joint service with Gravesend. So when he talked to us about that, it only took 2 people to be on long-term sick to affect the work programme. And it would have skewed these numbers into long-term sick. And the reason it happened was people were called for the operations that they were awaiting. He didn't obviously disclose the reasons for these operations, but people were called to their operations. And looking at the timetable that the time frame that this covers, with 1st January 24 to December 24, this would start to, and we can see this, the long-term sick that time, towards the latter part of that year, it would be quite normal for those people to be called for their planned surgeries and various other things like that. And I would be hopeful, and I would expect that once we've done some of the right sizing in the departments that are most challenged for this, which would be children's and adults, and also when people recover from the treatment for their long-term sick, that these numbers, hopefully when we look at them again, or when employment looks at them again, not necessarily this committee, but members look at it again, that we should see an improvement in that. But the other thing that I really am happy about is that we're talking about it. And we're talking about it, and thank Councillor Brake for bringing it up, that physical health and mental health needs to be looked at in the round. And some of these statistics absolutely mandate that we do that. So I would be hopeful, and I'm sure that this will come to employment matters, committee, that these figures for particularly the long term will come down. I mean, we're all going to get colds and flus. We're all going to get upset stomachs. So the short term stuff doesn't bother me, but I definitely appreciate the fact that you're looking at this in such granular detail. And I would expect that with the recommendation that Councillor Prenter moved, that this will move forward in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. don't have any other member, but just a quick one from me. I know there's a lot of technology out there, in particular now, that are being developed to diagnose stress and anxiety. Even smartphone and watches tend to do that. I just wonder how we're looking, because if you got early diagnosis, you could prevent the problem from getting worse over time. And you know, where are we? Is there any scope to encourage early diagnosis in terms of stress and anxiety?
Thank you, Chair. So as part of our contract with Care First, all of our members are able to download an app. And within that app on your mobile phone, there is a number of things that point people to self-help guides, nudge people to think about blood pressure, what they're eating, sleep, alcohol consumption, smoking, etc. So we've made sure that there is a personal tool available to everybody that they, if they wish to download, they can have access to. We do a lot in terms, we have a HR newsletter that goes out monthly. So we will theme activities on that and signpost people and nudge people. Also, as part of our Care First contract, we run webinars on particular topics. So every month we will have a host of webinars that go out across the organisation. So professionals will come and talk about topics and anything nationally that might be of a concern, or we can request something that is unique to us in Medway. And we work very closely with public health colleagues. So public health colleagues are always got a whole array of stuff that they can push across the organisation, and we make sure that we push that internally as well. So again, we're using a bit of our own internal mechanisms for pushing that, but making sure that people have access through mobile devices, which is personal to them and therefore private as well. And most definitely when we go out to recontract, that's one of the things we will be looking at, what is available now today and what could we tap into. So it's most people have a smartwatch now. You know, we know that some teams do step competitions, so who could get the most steps, and they can share their data on that. So again, we're encouraging teams to have that kind of team event together, which does help bring teams together and do that wellness stuff, which links into the walk-in meetings and that kind of activity. We make sure that if we've got a mental health week, or if there's any other kind of calendar event that we're doing, we will do a hosted walk from Gunwharf, and we'll go around the area and invite people along. So again, a number of initiatives right across the piece, but largely down to teams really pushing that internally.
Thank you very much. Thanks. I'm quite pleased with that. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair.
I move the recommendation at page 35. The committee is asked to note the report. We have a further recommendation to work with staff, including our recognised trade unions, to further develop staff wellbeing strategies, to continue to support those on sick leave, and to improve wellbeing, and to ensure we are an employer of choice across Medway. We also had a request to circulate the median and arithmetic mode data. Arithmetic, I've been corrected. Yeah, I've been corrected. And a briefing note that provides some comparative analysis.
Is that supported? Councillor Brown. Is that great?
I said it right.
Great. That brings us on to agenda item 7, the Procurement Strategy 2021 to 2025, Update Report 2025. I'll ask Michael Kelly, Head of Category Management, to introduce the report.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and evening all. So obviously I'm pleased to be here again another year on.
So your microphone, please.
Can you just move a little bit closer to the microphone? Sorry, Mike.
It did turn itself off. Here we go. We'll start that again. Okay, great. Pleased to be here again, obviously another year on. Final update to the Procurement Strategy 21 to 25. You'll see from the report, the strategy has naturally served its original purpose. So the point today is obviously to draw that to a close. That allows us to remain realistically ambitious in our approach. Obviously, a new report will come to this forum later on in this year as well, so I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Michael. Any member? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you for the report. Especially looking at the Appendix 1, do you think those scores are really realistic? I mean, I just look at some of them, which is the extent to which councils have offered personal development programmes, and you've still got it as a number 3. I can't remember being offered a personal programme for procurement training. So how is that really sort of transpiring into it? If you look at another one, number 7, it says that the slides were available in November 2023 and it still hasn't been delivered. I mean, how are those scores really reflective of what's happening in the real world?
Yeah, of course, thanks for that. So the column you referred to was part of last year's annual update as well. Obviously, part of that was a call for any additional training, support, or any literature that supports that as well. So obviously, behind the scenes, those conversations continue to go on in terms of training, but there's been no direct request for that at the same time.
So why are those scores so high? Why isn't it a 2 or a 1? Or?
Of course, yeah. So it's not as if nothing has happened, but the training, the ability is there, and that offering is available.
Thank you, Marco. Any other member? Vice Chair.
I move recommendations at page 45, 1.1, to note the achievements of the 4th year of the 2021-2025 procurement strategy as outlined in Appendix 1 with updated comments. 1.2, to note the conclusion of the 2021-2025 procurement strategy. 1.3, to note the development of a new procurement strategy in the 25-26 financial year derived from the objectives of within the NPPS.
Thank you. Is that supported? Councillor Bowen. It's agreed. Agenda item 8, use of agency staff and consultant. I ask Chief Organisation Culture Officer Sam Beck-Farley to introduce the report. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an overview of the use of agency staff, and whilst a key focus previously has been on children's, for completeness the report covers all directorates. We currently have around 211 agency consultants being used across the council for the duration of Q3. This compares to approximately 193 for the same quarter last year. The cost is forecasted to be just short of 16 million. However, it is to be noted many of these locum posts will be covering vacancies, therefore that is not a whole additional extra cost. Children's, business support and RCE have seen a reduction in costs and numbers. However, due to the establishment increase in adults and the demand in SEND, this has contributed to the overall increase. Placements across the organisation are a mix of short-term projects where the council does not have the specialist expertise in-house, or where there is a national skills shortage and we need to fill vacancies through statutory responsibility. It's also to note that some of these posts will be covering staff absence. Children's previously have had a high number of locums, and this was largely due to project teams being appointed for a temporary period to manage high demands, which resulted in backlogs of statutory work. At its highest, this was over 100. However, as of January this year, this has reduced by almost 50%. Of the 56 locums that we have in post, it is to be noted that only 1 now is additional capacity. 50, however, are covering vacant posts, which we continue to try to recruit to, and we have 5 covering staff absence. Legal also has been an area of concern previously, and they have also reduced by 50%. This does also include the use of advocates instead of using external barristers on cases that reflects the savings in doing so. Adults had agreement this financial year to increase their establishment. Now that the structure is in place, we have started to do proactive recruitment, and January saw an appointment of 37 staff, of which 4 transferred from locum contracts into permanent contracts, with others willing to do so also. Adults currently have 61 locums, largely filling their vacancies across a number of teams. Our recruitment effort continues. However, we are confident with the work that we've done with children's in reducing their figure and now having a very much stronger competitive pay in place, as well as structured professional frameworks and a number of enhanced benefits. This puts us in a very strong attraction position and will help us to move towards our ambition of becoming an employer of choice. Send has seen the highest increase in locums across this period, currently 54 in place, but as mentioned by the Leader of the Council, we had to bring in trained additional capacity to clear the EHC backlog that needed attention. It is to be noted that a lot of those posts that have been brought in through locum use for this period are not full-time and are only paid per assessment. It's also to be noted that within SEND, the substantive workforce has reduced by 2/3 since last April, with now only 8 locums covering business-as-usual vacancies. The committee are asked to note this report.
Thank you, Sam. Any member? Councillor Brake.
Thank you for the report. This is obviously a subject that is discussed and looked at on a very regular basis. The leader this evening was quite jubilant, I think is probably the best way of describing it, the number of people that were coming or going to him and expressing their desire to be full-time members of Medway Council rather than working as locums. We all know that locums do cost more money than employing regular staff, so there's always that opportunity to make sure that people are rewarded for their skills in the workplace. But equally, we found in Medway in the past that particularly on social care workers, that at one stage we were having people that were working here, they'd give in their notice, they'd leave Medway Council on the Friday, and sometimes the following week they were working back here in the same desk, doing the same job, but working as locums, simply because it was an opportunity of having an increase in salary. And in fact, at one stage, we finished up having an agreement with our neighbours within Kent in particular, that said if anybody does leave the workplace under such circumstances, there should be a defined period before those individuals are allowed back into the workplace, really as a way of trying to discourage people leaving the workplace, or indeed to become full-time members of our workforce. Going back to the Leader of the Council and his jubilation at all of these people, what is the actual number of people that were locums in the last year that have actually offered and have become full-time members of staff right across all the directorates? What sort of numbers are we looking at, please?
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Sam, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So most definitely on the first point around us having some principles of people returning, we're part of the South East Memorandum of Understanding around locums and the use of locums, and that's to make sure that there isn't that kind of poaching effect or people jumping between local authorities. And most definitely we have mechanisms in place that if permanent members of staff were to leave, we wouldn't be re-employing them as locums within a defined period. So I think we have the right mechanisms in place and the right partnerships across the South East to do just that. I don't have the exact figure with me right now, but I'm happy to come out and give that to you. A large focus has been around children's, and we have had a high number of conversions across children's. And that's been largely down to us making sure that when our locums are with us, we're treating them like normal staff and not just hired help who we don't care about. So we've enhanced our induction programme for locums, and that is the view for them to really find out what Medway's about and come and work with Medway and want to stay with Medway. And we found that's really is a key attraction tool. So we run events, which are our temp to perm events, and we make sure that the director from the directorate will come out and talk about the positive things that Medway can offer and the service. And I know that for children's, we've run them quarterly during the last year, and we're about to embark on a whole load of those for adults. So don't have the figure directly in front of me, but we definitely have had a high number, which I'm happy to report on once I can go back to the office and get that.
Thank you, that would be appreciated. Sorry, the other point that I wanted to mention, and that was the training of individuals through apprenticeship schemes. How successful are we in converting those apprentices into full-time employment? and how long do they stay on average, please?
Thank you. Again, I wouldn't have the exact figure, but our apprenticeship programme is really successful. We make sure that we match people who are coming to the end of their apprenticeship into any jobs that we have, very similar to a redeployment pool. So it's very rare that we would lose an apprentice without them becoming a full-time member of staff if they wish to stay with us. So happy to get the figures on those that stay with us. But that is probably one of the key attraction areas for our early talent that we really do maximise. So happy again to come back out. I guess with in children's in particular, we have our NQSWs that join with us and stay for a period of time. I would say we're probably not as successful there, and that has been in the past down to pay in competing local authorities. We're in a much stronger position now, so we expect to see that change. And as a result of our early talent strategy, we've taken more on this year to make sure that we've got more of a pipeline coming in from early talent.
Thank you. Could I ask that perhaps in the recommendations that the offer of providing that information is included, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brake. Councillor Hockwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam, for your report. I must say the headline is not very impressive, that we actually, you know, the leader of the council said that one of his objectives when he became leader was to try and drive down the amount of locums, and actually we've gone in a reverse way. We've gone up since the same quarter as last time, 190 versus 211. So the headline figures doesn't make good reading. If you delve down into some of the detail, I mean, the locums in legal, for example, we agreed at full council that we restructured the whole of the legal department so we could pay people more money. And if you look at the reports later in the revenue report, you can actually see it reflected in that we actually budgeted for them to be full-time and not locums. So we have a saving on, because we've not got full-time, but we've overspent in locums. You can see 800 versus 930,000 or something in that report of Q3. So why has it not been that successful in the legal department? Because we've only managed to convert half the people, rather than, you know, I think it was 26 locums down to 30, and we've still got 13. So that I would like to understand, because we did take as a council some very specific actions to make sure that those legal people would be converted to permanence. I understand the SEND thing, it's very difficult. The other thing that concerns me, you know, that you mentioned the rate of locums, then you go on to justify that it's a 30% increase for staff, and, you know, for real staff when you've got holiday and sick pay. And how do we treat our locums? I mean, I thought there's some legislation around, like, if you were there more than 12 weeks, you have the same rights as a permanent employee. So would that extend, if that's true, are those people on that sort of contract that after 12 weeks they would have sick pay and holiday pay and all the rest of it? I'd be interested to know on that. And also, I understand that if someone's a temporary person or a locum or whatever for 4 years, then they have the right to have a permanent job. How many people have we got that are over 4 years, are coming up to 4 years, that have that right? Just a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hockwell. Sam, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think the first comment around we've gone reverse, I don't think we've gone reverse. I think the paper clearly articulates, in my introduction, clearly articulated the high demand that has happened. So we have to consider that demand will move across the organisation, and our establishment's not always going to have the capacity to pick it up, particularly when it's a statutory requirement. So we do, on those points, have to get in short-term labour that's going to help us clear when backlogs are starting to merge. So I think, you know, if directors were here for those areas, they would always say we're never going to be a situation where we're going to have no locums and no need for locums. So where we break even on that and what that looks like and where we're satisfied, we probably haven't landed on yet. And I think part of going into our Medpay review and putting in the career structures and making sure that we're paying competitively will give us much more of a competitive platform for us to be able to really structure our workforce design around what is acceptable in terms of our local carrying and how do we manage that workforce into the future a bit better. So, you know, I think we're moving really fast forward on that, but we're just not out of the other end of that and don't have enough information to determine it. The particular point around legal, I mentioned within my introduction, there has been a conscious decision to use advocates there rather than external barristers, and that is because of cost and demand and the flexibility that that service affords us. So again, within legal, there was never a desire to get to zero locums. Absolutely a reduction. I don't recall certainly saying we'd be in a zero position. And I think from a service managing their budget and managing the best way to get the kind of service delivery they need, they've got to have the flexibility around the contractual types that they might then engage with around those specialist areas. And that is exactly this in terms of the advocates. That's a better option for that service to engage with advocates. The other difficulty we've had in legal is there's been a higher demand across the people team services. And that's relevant when you see what's going on across the People Directorate. They have had to make sure they've gone to market to get the right calibre of people in, and that's probably where we've got our highest vacancy still. So we're still trying our recruitment efforts there, but we're not attracting with the people side. But the place side we have managed to fully fill. I think we've only got one now. The element about employment rights after a period of time, it's rights, not contractual terms. So it's not necessarily they get sick pay and holiday pay, it's about how they're treated. So it's employment rights in that regard, for them to be treated fairly and consistently along with the workforce. We don't disengage them, and we've made great efforts into making sure we're including the locums as part of our workforce, but it doesn't naturally give them access to our pension scheme, for example. And then your final point around how many do we have over 4 years, I don't have the figure this evening, happy to get that and share that and what those roles might be and why.
Just to come back on the legal thing, in the revenue monitoring that we're going to see later, agenda item 10, I think, there's a section in there that says that, you know, we've got overspend in legal services, but an underspend of 815 on permanent staff and an overspend on agency staff. So it does look as though the budget planned for them to be all permanent financially. Whether that, you know, it's the two sides talking to each other, I guess.
Thank you. Would you like a comment, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, whenever we're setting our budget, it's going to be on our establishment, and we're going to assume that they are within the range that we've established for that particular post, and that's fair and consistent. If there's a skills shortage nationally, we are going to be at a tall order in order to fulfil that, and that's the case with this particular team around the people side of it. Locally, we have a skills shortage that we can't draw those permanent contracts in, and that's always then going to create that budget pressure. So it's not a position where we're sitting comfortably. We're still going to try with our recruitment efforts, but in the situation where there's skill shortages around us and the labour market isn't there for us, we are going to have to rely on locum labour because these cases still need to be taken forward and they still need to be actioned. We can't leave it unfilled. And that's why we're in this position. So, you know, everything is great if we can get the labour around us, but if we can't make that attraction and there is a skill shortage, then we are going to be up against it, particularly from the establishment budgeted position.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much. Chair, mine was more a comment than a question, although, as always, I'd be quite happy for the officer to comment if they wish. But I thought the leader's comments tonight were more a case of cautious optimism and jubilation, and I didn't read them in the same way as Councillor Brake did. And as regards the points that Councillor Brake and Councillor Hatwell made at the end of the day, any request for figures will only be a snapshot. I mean, let's look at what's happening in adult social care. As I understand it, there have been lots of positive changes to pay and conditions with the new structure and introducing more training, which had been neglected. Slowly, locums are applying for consolidated posts, and we have a good conversion rate for newly qualified social workers staying with us, which I think is addressing some of the points that were made on the other side of the chamber. So I'm looking at this from a cautiously optimistic lens, if not a jubilant one, and you know, progress will come in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Hockerscott.
I'm actually kind of echoing what Councillor Jones has just said, but just to say, you know, we've had you know, parents and children waiting eight years for educational healthcare plans. I'm kind of, you know, championing the 63,000 children here, and I'm glad that we've got locums to address that, because there's nothing worse than children not having their needs met, because it actually 8 years is like, you know, 50% of their education almost. So I'm relieved about that, and cautiously optimistic that we're, you know, that we're national. And, you know, I'm sorry that we had to take on the rot of the last administration personally, but I'm glad we've got locums to support our vulnerable children, you know, and we're moving in the right direction. But, you know, there's a national shortage of social workers. It's not just a Medway-wide thing. So I embrace that we're looking after locums and that we're encouraging them to stay. But I'm also linking it to the last point where Sam talked about well-being, because, you know, some of our social workers deal with such traumatic vulnerable families, vulnerable incidents and safeguarding that, you know, they burn out. We've got an ageing population, and so national vacancy rates are really high. Caseloads are rising, and unfortunately that's where mistakes can be made. And, you know, the former government, you know, have no qualms about you know, let's say, for example, educational psychologists becoming a PhD profession, but actually, you know, it used to just be an MA or an MEd profession, but you kind of, you know, you have to give that time, because obviously it requires a couple of more years training, and then there's a national shortage, and of course, you know, some people are going to jump on the bandwagon and become consultants. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and I thank you for all you're doing. Sam, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harker-Scott. Sam, would you like to come back?
No, all good, thank you. I'm cautiously optimistic as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations at page 85, 1.1. The committee is asked to note the achievement in children's services and note other areas of use. There's a request to produce a briefing note on the number of conversions from locums to permanent staff, numbers regarding apprenticeship success, and data across a 4-year period.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Bowen. Agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 9, the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary. I'll ask Chief Organizational Culture Officer Sam Beck-Farley to introduce the report. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. This report summarises the performance for the Council Plan programme and the values that fall under the remit of this committee for Q3. That can be found in Appendix 1. The report also presents the Q3 review of the strategic risks in Appendix 2. It's to be noted that there were no change to the strategic risk scores. As we're aware, this is the first year reporting our One Medway Council Plan, and the indicators within this plan are annual. Therefore, data on the performance indicators that fall under the remit of this committee are not available until the end of Q4. However, there is a narrative and commentary around those indicators that do fall under the remit for the reporting period, and committee are asked to note that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any member? Vice Chair.
I move recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 at page 95.
Is that supported? Councillor Harker-Scott. Say agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 10, the Revenue Budget Monitoring. I'll ask Dave Reynolds, Head of Revenue Accounts, to introduce the report. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. So the report was presented to Cabinet on the 11th of February and summarises the budget monitoring positions that have been considered by Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted by Budget Managers for the third round of budget monitoring in December 2024. There's a reported overspend across the council of 8.4 million, which is an improvement of just under 2.8 million from the position reported at round 2. Within that overall overspend, the areas within the remit of this committee are actually an underspend of around £2.2 million, and that figure is an improvement of around 1.7 from the position reported at round 2. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Any member? Councillor Hackwell.
Yeah, I just, whether this comes under the work programme or here, you know, we're looking at round 3, and next week is the end of the year. And with the same thing happened the last time, we reviewed round 2, and it was a week away from round 3 getting published. I wonder if we could look at how we could look at these reports sort of a bit sooner than sort of like the last week of the report's relevance, really. It just seems to me that, you know, last time we were talking about something that was 3 months old, and we're doing the same almost tonight. It doesn't seem right. That appears the same for the capital one, that is the next one as well.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Steve, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I understand the difficulty of that. Obviously, the Council has considered the schedule of meetings for next year in January, and that will go back to Council in May. Happy to look at it, but at this stage, I'm not sure if for next year we could make significant changes to this for the next year's cycle, but happy to look at it.
Thank you, Steve. Any member? Vice Chair.
Okay. I move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 at page 117.
Is that supported? Councillor Bowen. Is that agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 11, Capital Budget Monitoring Round 3, 2024-2025. I'll ask Dave Redknowles again, Head of Revenue Accounts, to introduce the report. Dave.
So thank you, Chair. So again, this is the third round of budget monitoring, this time for the capital. Again, this was presented to Cabinet on 11th February, having been considered by both the corporate and director management teams based on returns submitted by budget managers in December 2024. Section 4 on page 126 contains information for directorates, for all directorates for context. Table 1 in section 4.1 details the financial summary for the capital programme, and Table 2 on the following page details the associated funding streams associated with that budget. Please note that the totals on the Table 2 are incorrect, but please be assured that the overall kind of figures within that table are correct. Happy to explain that if people wish. If not, just happy to take some further questions.
Thank you, Dave. Any member? Councillor Hamilton.
Could we just have a little explanation, please?
Yeah, let me go to the report. Hang on. So, if you look at Table 1, there is a column headed up remaining budget that totals 328.821 million and has kind of totals for each directorate in the respective rows. Now, if you move down to Table 2, each column of that will sum back to the figures for each directorate. So, for example, for Children and Adults Directorate, in Table 1, it says 34.857 million. And if you looked at the column for CNA, the 32,272, the 1.3 million, and the 1,285 come back to that same figure. And the same is in the same for all the other respective columns.
You content with that? Thank you, Dave. Do I have any member? Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, I'm looking at Table 1. You've got a forecast underspend of best part of nearly £7.75 million. Presumably, that is money which has been drawn down but not yet spent. Is that correct? Is that like an agreed overdraft, as it were?
In terms of the line on children's, the £2.3 million, I think it was in the council budget report that there were kind of recommendations to kind of amend those budgets. So those budgets have now been removed, so there is no longer an underspend to be reported on those children and adults ones. In terms of the regen one, 5 million of that 5.2 million is related to the kind of replacement of the waste vehicle programme, and the services are just kind of finalising the final cost of that, but there's no plan to spend that additional 5 million. So if they don't spend it, that will come out of the capital programme, and any new requests for further capital spend would have to go through the correct process.
So it's almost like an agreed overdraft. You don't use it unless you need it.
Yeah, you don't use it if it's not required. So yeah.
I'm just thinking, if on the face of it, you've got the £7.6 million underspend, and we've got a question is how many borrowing how much money. But no, that's answered my question, or clarified it for me anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Hadwell.
Just a quick question, and probably maybe the right officers in the room, but the delay for the floor, which is the capital expenditure, which is directly in the ITC centre, which is the capital item directly related to this overview and scrutiny committee, should have been completed last autumn. How confident are we it's going to be completed by November 25? Paul can answer, right? It is.
Yeah. I can confirm that work started. Obviously, the first could take down and show you, but it looks really good. It started, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Any member? Vice Chair.
Okay. I move the recommendations at page 150. The Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the results of the third round of capital budget monitoring for 2024-2025.
Thank you. Is that supported? Councillor Hawkers, go. Is that agreed? Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 12, the work programme. I will ask Steve Dickens, the Democratic Services Officer, to introduce the report. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So just one item I'd like members to note. The work programme for next year doesn't currently include portfolio holders being held to account. That will be discussed over the coming period and will be reported to the committee in June. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
No. Oh yes, it is. It is now working. Obviously a plot. Chair, I just wanted to make sure that we included, probably in June when we come to discuss the FIT programme, the comment that was made earlier from the other side of the room about, I think it might even have been from yourself, Chair, with all due respect, a review of the SITFA process auditing, really the exceptional support they were helping us with, to be included as part of that report to come in June. It may have been, it may be an officer's draft report anyway, but I just wanted to make sure that that element, the review of SITFA, work with us was included in that conjunction with the FIT report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll just whisper into the Democratic Services Officer about that. So, yeah, well spotted. Thank you. Any other member? Is that supported? So agreed. That brings us to the end of tonight. Thank you very much.